Chapter 1494. The first of these three conditions was to have the primordial violet chi. Only by obtaining the primordial violet chi could one obtain the approval of the Great Way and have a chance to become a sage. Fortunately, Gu Han had obtained a strand of primordial purple aura a long time ago. This strand of primordial purple aura had been given to Gu Han by Fleeting Maple. Even now, Gu Han still did not understand why Fleeting Maple, who had come from another dimension, had obtained primordial purple aura from the origin world and had given it to him so generously. Although he did not understand this, he did not bother thinking about it. Anyway, the primordial violet chi in Gohan's body was genuine primordial violet chi, and that was enough. The second condition was that Guhan had to master the method of splitting consciousness fragments, which Guhan had already done. Moreover, Guhan had hundreds of millions of consciousness fragments. This requirement could not be more perfect for Guhan. The third condition was that Guhan had to obtain the remains of Pangu. The so-called remains of Pangu actually referred to Pangu's corpse, and it could not be an ordinary corpse, but a corpse that had condensed Pangu's life essence. This was because the main world was in a state of chaos. It was Pangu who gave birth to the Great Way and created the world. In other words, Pangu was the source of all things and powers in this world, and the Great Way itself was born from Pangu's body. To become a sage under the Great Way, one had to obtain Pangu's remains and become one with the Great Way in order to become a sage. Back then, Sage Hongjun obtained Pangu's primordial elixir, which was the jade butterfly of fate, and became a sage. Taishang Laojun, Tong Tian, and Yuanshi Tianzuan were originally the incarnation of Pangu's primordial spirit. They themselves were Pangu's remains, so this problem was not a problem for them at all. Sage Junti and Sage Jin became sages because they obtained Pangu's weapon, Pangu's axe, and the Bodhi tree, which was transformed from Pangu's wisdom. As for Goddess Nuo, she and her brother Fushi were innate gods that were born before Pangu created the world. They shared the same origin as Pangu, but Pangu grew the fastest and achieved the mission of creating the world. Goddess Nuo and Fushi had only awakened after Pangu's creation of the world. However, because they shared the same origin as Pangu, they later obtained the living soil of the nine heavens, which was transformed from Pangu's essence, and finally became saints. And now it was Gohan's turn. Pangu had been dead for God knows how many years, and the remains of Pangu had long been divided up by those who intended to become saints. How could there be any remains left for Gohan? Theoretically, Gohan couldn't find Pangu's body even if he spent his entire life searching. But as the saying goes, fortune lies in the midst of misfortune. Right now, the best set of Pangu's remains was right in front of Flowing Maple. He believed that everyone understood by now that this set of Pangu's remains was none other than the arrogant and despotic 12 Zhu Wu, who had been hunting humans everywhere. The 12 Zhu Wu were formed from Pangu's blood essence, and their entire bodies were Pangu's remains. They were born in the same way as the three pure ones of Taoism. However, the 12 Zhu Wu were not intelligent enough, and could never become saints in their entire lives. They became the only way for Gohan to fulfill the last requirement. This did not conflict with Gohan's original goal. Gohan originally wanted to kill the 12 Zhu Wu. But now, he had another goal, and that was to refine the 12 Zhu Wu's blood essence to fulfill the last requirement to become a saint. After all three requirements were fulfilled, Gohan could choose one of the three ways to become a saint to prove his Tao. Among the three ways, the first was to prove his Tao through strength. As the name implied, this method was to continuously accumulate one's strength until it reached the level of a saint. Then, one could defeat the heavenly Tao and directly reach the great Tao to become a saint. The second method was to achieve the Tao by severing the three corpses, which was to sever good, evil, and one's self so that the heavenly Tao could not monitor one's existence. Finally, one could reach the great Tao and become a saint. The third method was to become a saint through virtue. By accumulating unparalleled virtue, one could obtain the recognition of the heavenly Tao and let the heavenly Tao take the initiative to allow one to reach the great Tao and become a saint. This might sound a bit confusing, but let's use a simple analogy. First, one had to understand that the supreme thing in the world was the great Tao. The great Tao controlled the operation of all things. Whether it was the origin world or the dimensional world, it controlled the order and rules of all worlds. If one wanted to surpass the Emperor's sword and reach the realm of a saint, one had to obtain the recognition of the great Tao and obtain the understanding of the order and rules of the great Tao to become a saint. The heavenly Tao was the incarnation that the great Tao directly used to control different worlds. It was equivalent to the son of the great Tao. Every world had its own heavenly Tao. There were as many heavenly Tao as there were different dimensional worlds. The great Tao was not something that one could see just because one wanted to. The great Tao was extremely mysterious. It drifted away from all worlds and one could not find it even if one wore out iron shoes. The only way to find the great Tao was through the heavenly Tao. This was the only way to communicate with the great Tao. The great Tao was like a general sitting steadily in the central military tent, while the heavenly Tao was like a soldier guarding the entrance of the central military tent. Among the three methods to become a saint mentioned previously, the Tao by strength was to use one's own strength to directly defeat the soldier guarding the entrance of the central military tent. Then, one could openly enter the central military tent to meet the general. The Tao by severing the three corpses to become a saint was to find a way to make oneself invisible and hide from the eyes of the soldier guarding outside the central military tent. Then, one could sneak into the central military tent to meet the general. The Tao by virtue was to bribe the soldier with a large amount of bribes. Finally, the soldier would take the initiative to step aside and let one in. From this, it could be seen that in terms of difficulty, the Tao by strength was naturally the most difficult. The Tao by severing the three corpses was slightly less difficult, and the Tao by virtue was the easiest. So far, no one had been able to walk the path of Tao by strength. In other words, no one had become a saint through the method of Tao by strength. As for Hong Jun, Taishang Laojun, and Jie Yin, the three of them achieved the position of a saint through the method of severing the three corpses to become a saint. As for Goddess Nviwa, Saint Zhuan-Ti, as well as the heavenly Lord Yuanshi and sect leader Tongtian, they all achieved the position of a saint through the method of merit. Among them, Goddess Nviwa became a saint by relying on the merits of human beings, Saint Zhuan-Ti became a saint by relying on the merits of establishing Buddhism, and the heavenly Lord Yuanshi established the Chan sect with the help of Taishang Laojun. At the same time, he educated human beings through the Chan sect, which was to teach human beings the merits of cultivating to become immortals. As for sect leader Tongtian, he did the opposite. He relied on teaching non-human creatures and accumulated merits to become a saint. In fact, in terms of merits, Goddess Nviwa's merits were the highest. She created humans and mended the sky. Her merits were boundless. In the end, Goddess Nviwa was the weakest among the saints. The merits of sect leader Tongtian and the heavenly Lord Yuanshi were actually far inferior to Goddess Nviwa. However, sect leader Tongtian and the heavenly Lord Yuanshi were too heaven-defying. They were formed from Pangu's primordial spirit and were born with the great merits of Pangu's creation of the world. They were only a step away from becoming a saint. As a result, after becoming a saint, the strength of sect leader Tongtian and the heavenly Lord Yuanshi was actually above Goddess Nviwa and Saint Zhuan-Ti. This was the benefit of having a powerful father. P.S. Regarding the theory of becoming a saint, first of all, I have to thank the great creator of dreaming of divine armaments. I'm just copying from others. However, primordial chaos was formed by the power of many later authors. Various sayings and settings of becoming a saint are only self-justifying under a certain framework. Therefore, I hope that all the readers will not use the settings in other novels to criticize the author for being wrong or the settings are wrong. Of course, it's your right to say it, but it's my right to turn a blind eye to it. As for the current Gohan, he had read these three methods over and over again several times. However, he felt that none of them were suitable for him because the heavenly axiom no longer existed. Yes, you're right. The heavenly axiom no longer existed. In order to surpass the saints and reach an unprecedented height, Hong Jun decided to integrate himself with the heavenly axiom. In other words, he used his own body to integrate with the heavenly axiom and then completely control the heavenly axiom. As long as he controlled the heavenly axiom, Hong Jun would be able to surpass the saints. This was not based on any previous experience. It was completely guessed by Hong Jun himself after tens of millions of years. As a result, Hong Jun was indeed a genius of his generation. He actually gradually integrated himself with the heavenly axiom. This was why Hong Jun had the strength to crush any saint. However, no one knew why Hong Jun died. He was killed by sect leader Tong Tian. When Hong Jun died, the result was that the heavenly axiom, which had gradually integrated with Hong Jun, also died. However, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. The heavenly axiom died, but it did not immediately collapse. Instead, it began to gradually disintegrate. This led to tragedies such as the sinking of China. Later, the saints also realized that there was a big problem with the heavenly axiom. However, the saints did not dare to imagine the fact that the heavenly axiom had died. They thought that there was something wrong with Hong Jun's cultivation. Therefore, they wanted to see their master and simply went to visit him. However, they were ambushed by the scheming sect leader Tong Tian. The battles that happened later that affected all the dimensional worlds accelerated the collapse of the heavenly axiom. Today, 1,000 years later, the heavenly axiom was completely finished. The main world had completely lost the control of the heavenly axiom like a motherless child. Otherwise, no matter how great the remaining power of sect leader Tong Tian was, it was impossible for him to open the dimensional wall of the main world so wantonly and let Yuan Ko enter the main world. If this happened millions of years ago in the untainted land where people worshipped the heavenly axiom, it would definitely scare many people to death. However, Gohan, who was born in modern times, had just heard the word heavenly axiom. Before that, he did not know or care about the heavenly axiom. Even if he knew that the heavenly axiom no longer existed, his emotions did not change. For people in the untainted land, the death of the heavenly axiom was like the death of their mother. For Gohan, the death of the heavenly axiom was like the death of their next-door neighbor, even if the next-door neighbor was their biological mother. However, a biological mother was a biological mother after all. Therefore, in the face of the current situation, Gohan felt troubled. To become a saint, one had to pass the heavenly axiom. However, now that the heavenly axiom was finished, where should Gohan find a new heavenly axiom? This seemed to have become an unsolvable problem. Chapter 1495. The saint who created this saint's relic had already foreseen the existence of this problem. After they defeated sect leader Tong Tian, they had already discovered that the way of heaven had been killed. They also knew that after the death of the way of heaven, no one could come into contact with the Great Way and become a sage. The saint was well aware of this. At the same time, he also knew that if this problem was not solved, the future generations would not be able to defeat sect leader Tong Tian. Therefore, before creating this saint's relic, the saint and Taishang Laojun had planned together and actually came up with a set of solutions to the current predicament. According to the saint, the way of heaven was the only way to become a sage. Without the way of heaven, it was absolutely impossible to become a sage. Therefore, the way of heaven must exist. This was something that could not be avoided. Therefore, the saint proposed a somewhat bizarre method in Gohan's eyes, which was to recreate the way of heaven. Yes, you heard it right. The method that the saint came up with was very simple. It was to recreate the way of heaven. As long as the way of heaven was created, the door to the Great Way would be opened, and future generations would be able to become sages. This sounded like a fantasy. Even after becoming a sage, one could not figure out the rules and methods of the way of heaven. How could a guy who had not yet become a sage create a brand new way of heaven? However, with the planning and supplementation of the two experts, the Saint and Taishang Laojun, they actually came up with a way to recreate the way of heaven, or rather, a way to recreate the way of heaven. In the end, the way of heaven was born from the Great Way. However, after careful investigation, one would find that the appearance of the way of heaven was also related to a conspiracy. The two sides of this conspiracy were the Great Way and Pangu, the two existences that originally coexisted. The Great Way was the most selfless existence in the world because it itself was the collection of all ways. It was not controlled by the thoughts of others. It was only responsible for maintaining the existence and rationality of all rules. It was precisely because of this that all existences that might destroy the rules of the world itself were the thorns in the eyes of the Great Way. The Great Way must destroy these unstable factors. Therefore, although Pangu truly created the entire world, as the creator of the world, Pangu was the most unstable factor in this world. The Great Tao had to kill Pangu. This was the fundamental meaning of the existence of the Great Tao. Therefore, a despicable scene happened. When Pangu successfully created the world and used his own body to support the world, the Great Tao secretly took action and directly killed Pangu, who was already exhausted. In other words, the Great Tao was actually the one who killed Pangu. However, there was nothing strange about this because besides the Great Tao, there was no other existence in this world that could kill Pangu. However, what the Great Tao didn't expect was that Pangu was still thinking about how to maintain the world he created at the moment of his death. At the same time, Pangu also knew that the Great Tao, which instinctively wanted to destroy all unstable factors, would destroy all living beings in this world. This was because as long as a living being was alive, then that living being could become a murderer that destroyed the order and laws of the entire world. It was an existence that the Great Tao had to eliminate. However, Pangu didn't want to see the world he created to be a dead and lifeless world. Therefore, he had to find a way to stop the Great Tao. At the last moment of his death, Pangu thought of a way to stop the Great Tao. That was to create an existence that blocked the Great Tao's way and use this existence to blind the Great Tao's eyes, making it think that the entire world was in an extremely harmonious state and that there was nothing worth destroying. This thing that blocked the Great Tao's eyes was naturally the Heavenly Tao. At the last moment, Pangu mixed the remaining 10 billion pieces of his consciousness with his flesh and blood, which represented the entire world, and the mystery that appeared at the moment of his death to create the mysterious existence known as the Heavenly Tao. As expected, it successfully blocked the Great Tao and became the firm guard outside the Great Tao's door, blocking all living beings that tried to see the Great Tao. Unless they crossed over the Heavenly Tao, they would never be able to see the real Great Tao. At the same time, the consciousness that existed in Pangu's fragments of consciousness to protect the entire world and maintain its peace and eternity merged with the Heavenly Tao. Therefore, the Heavenly Tao was constantly maintaining the stability of the entire world, trying its best to wipe out the powerful races and existences in the world so that the entire world would be in the hands of a race that wasn't that powerful. This was also why the powerful races such as the Wu people and the demon race lost their ruling rights in the world. In the end, a relatively mediocre race like the human race, which was also full of wisdom, took control of the world. This was because this was the result that the Heavenly Tao had long since set up. This was the process of the Heavenly Tao's appearance. Ordinary people couldn't possibly know the secret of the birth of the world. Only the Saint Jie-in and Taishang Laojun, who had come into contact with the Heavenly Tao and the Great Tao at the same time and toured the entire Great Tao's rules, could see the dark history that happened at the beginning of the world through the Great Tao's rules and know the root cause of the Heavenly Tao's existence. Therefore, if one wanted to recreate the heavenly Tao, Pangu would become the most crucial factor. Without Pangu, it was impossible to create a brand new heavenly Tao. Of course, the real Pangu couldn't be revived, but it wasn't completely impossible to create a fake Pangu, because there were the 12 Zhu Wu, the descendants of Pangu's essence blood. The saints naturally knew the 12 Zhu Wus very well. They naturally knew that the 12 Zhu Wus could create a fake Pangu through the 12 divine fiends formation. Even if it was a fake Pangu, it was enough, because the fake Pangu was only a fake of Pangu's consciousness and soul, but Pangu's body wasn't fake. It was the real Pangu's body. Such a Pangu's body also represented the entire world, and could be used as the flesh and blood to incubate the heavenly Tao. Combining what they said above, the Saint Jie Yin and Taishang Laojun finally came up with a way to recreate the heavenly Tao. First, they had to find a way to make the 12 Zhu Wus form the 12 divine fiends formation, so as to gather the real Pangu's body again and use it as the soil to incubate the heavenly Tao. Then, they had to send a large number of consciousness fragments, more than 10 billion, into Pangu's body, Zhu Jihong, as the foundation of the heavenly Tao's reunion. The last and most crucial step was that the owner of these consciousness fragments had to defeat Pangu's real body with his own strength. He had to completely strangle Pangu's real body, so as to restore the scene of the great Tao secretly killing Pangu when Pangu created the world. Using Pangu's death as the last medicine, all the consciousness fragments could be purified by Pangu's real body and nurture a brand new heavenly Tao. This was the method that the Saint Jie Yin and Taishang Laojun came up with to recreate the heavenly Tao. It sounded very complicated and impossible to achieve, but it was also the only way for Gohan to become a saint and defeat Tong Tian. Gohan had to find a way to achieve all of this. Fortunately, the Saint Jie Yin and Taishang Laojun had already set up the biggest first move for Gohan, which was the 12 Zhu Wus. The Saint Jie Yin had racked his brains to find a dimensional world with 12 Zhu Wus. This dimensional world was very powerful and was second only to the main world. Otherwise, it would not be able to accommodate existences like the 12 Zhu Wus. The dimensional wall of this world was so powerful that even the Tongtian sect's remaining strength could not open the door of the dimensional wall of this world. Therefore, the power that the Saint Jie Yin attached to this dimensional wall was unusual. He did not desperately stop the Tongtian sect from opening the dimensional rift. Instead, he used all his strength to help the Tongtian sect tear an opening and let the 12 Zhu Wus enter the main world. After the 12 Zhu Wus entered the main world, Spirit Mountain was already weak. The Saint's relic had already helped Vairocana get rid of the filthy control again. At the same time, Vairocana had used some latent power that he had set up in the main world to help the humans and the demon race's heavenly court merge. Finally, he sealed the 12 Zhu Wus outside Shanhai Pass and waited for the pacifier to be born a few hundred years later. Then, he would unseal the 12 Zhu Wus and let them form the 12 capital heaven divine fiend array. More importantly, in order to let the 12 Zhu Wus get rid of the filthy control and to prevent the Tongtian sect from obstructing them, he had even asked Vairocana to pretend to look for the sealed 12 Zhu Wus alliance and tell the 12 Zhu Wus through Vairocana's mouth. If he wanted the main world to become the Wu people's world again, he had to become a native of this world and teach the 12 Zhu Wus how to get rid of the filthy control. This was a very crucial step. Only by becoming a native of the main world would the born Pangu also become a native of the main world. Only such a Pangu would be able to nurture the main world's heavenly Tao. This was also the reason why the 12 Zhu Wus wanted to make use of Yingzheng after his resurrection. It turned out that all of this was the scheme of the guide sage. This guy had actually started planning all sorts of things that would happen 1,000 years ago. Gohan, who only thought about all of this, could not help but feel fear from the bottom of his heart. If the guide sage was still alive, perhaps he would not have the chance to make a name for himself. Of course, if the guide sage was still alive, humans would not be able to bear the huge disaster brought about by the great apocalypse. All in all, the guide sage and Taishang Laojun had already laid the foundation for the future pacifier to nurture the heavenly Tao. What was left was the pacifier's own good fortune. The pacifier had to rely on his own power to create 10 billion consciousness fragments, and at the same time, possess the strength to kill the real body of Pangu. This was something that the pacifier had to achieve by himself, and was also something that the guide sage and Taishang Laojun could not foresee. They could only pray that the pacifier born in the future would be more powerful, or all the preparations and plans they had made would become nothing more than flowers in the mirror. Chapter 1496. After learning all this, Gohan could not help but feel touched by the sacrifice and plan of the two sages 1,000 years ago. More importantly, he was carrying a heavy responsibility on his shoulders. If he, as the pacifier, could not complete the rest of his task, he would be letting down the final sacrifice of the two sages who sacrificed themselves 1,000 years ago. At this time, there were two things that Gohan needed to do. First, Gohan had to get 10 billion consciousness fragments. This was the easiest thing to do, because after Gohan returned to the main world, he already had 10 billion consciousness fragments. However, the problem was that after Gohan returned to save his disciple, Lu Shihua, he had consumed 5 billion consciousness fragments. Now there were only 5 billion consciousness fragments left. In other words, Gohan had to split his consciousness fragments again. This sounded easy. After all, splitting consciousness fragments was already a walk in the park for Gohan. However, only Gohan could not help but laugh bitterly in his heart. This was because Gohan knew that if he wanted to split consciousness fragments, his own soul must be in its best state. Otherwise, he would not be able to sustain the consumption of consciousness fragments splitting. However, the problem was that when Gohan's soul rescued Lu Shihua, he had also consumed a lot of his origin. In the following time, he had been busy killing Yuan Ko and exploring Spirit Mountain. He had no chance to restore his soul at all. Unless Gohan was willing to sit down and recuperate quietly for about a month, he could forget about restoring his soul. Under normal circumstances, a month was not a big deal. The problem was that nearly 50 days had passed since Yuzhong City was besieged. How could Gohan have a month to restore his soul? Secondly, there was the power to kill Pangu. Through the memories of Pangu that Gohan had obtained from the sage's relic, it was completely impossible for Gohan, who was at the level of an immortal sword, to defeat the real body of Pangu, even if it was a fake real body of Pangu. Even if Gohan's swordsmanship flew to the sky, he would not be able to defeat the real body of Pangu. There was only one way to defeat the real body of Pangu. Gohan had to ascend to the throne immediately. Only with the power of an Emperor Sword-Bearer could Gohan be qualified to compete with the real body of Pangu. Now, the problem was back to the old way. If Gohan wanted to ascend to the throne, he had to repair the celestial trapping sword. In order to repair the celestial trapping sword, he had to pour a large amount of chaos force into it. However, the only person who could do that, Vairocana, was already dead. Everything seemed to have fallen into a vicious cycle that Gohan could not break out of. Fortunately, Gohan found a way to break this endless loop. In the sage's relic, apart from some of the words that the guide saint had told Gohan, as well as the ins and outs of the entire incident, the entire Buddhist cultivation method, as well as the guide saint's own cultivation method, were all gathered in this sage's relic. These methods naturally included the method to refine the chaotic power. If it was any other method, even if all the cultivation details were clearly laid out in front of Gohan, Gohan would not be able to cultivate it. This was because Gohan was, after all, a sword-bearer, which was fundamentally different from the Buddhist cultivation method. Unless Gohan was willing to give up all the sword essence in his body and cultivate the power of vow like a monk from the beginning, He would not be able to grasp these Buddhist cultivation method. Fortunately, the method to refine the chaotic power was different from other method. This was because refining the chaotic power required fragments of one's consciousness. Using fragments of one's consciousness as a medium, one could refine the purest chaotic power from the chaotic chi. Gohan made a rough estimate. If he wanted to resurrect the celestial trapping sword, he would need to consume about 3 billion fragments of consciousness to refine enough chaotic power. After seeing this, Gohan could not help but sigh. Even if he found the Jade Emperor and Vairocana at their peak, they might not be able to help him repair the celestial trapping sword. This was because even existences like Vairocana and the Jade Emperor, who were second only to the sages, probably did not have many fragments of consciousness in their bodies. At most, they had about 100 million. If they were to consume such precious fragments of consciousness to refine the chaotic power, they might as well be killed. This would destroy their foundation to become sages. Therefore, even if Gohan went to their doorstep, these two would definitely not help Gohan. The only one who could truly help Gohan repair the celestial trapping sword was Gohan himself. After all, Gohan was the only existence in the world who could split consciousness fragments at will. If this ability was made known to others, the Jade Emperor and Vairocana would probably die from anger. At this point, all the problems returned to the consciousness fragment. If Gohan wanted to achieve his goal of recreating the heavenly law, he would need to take out 13 billion fragments of consciousness. If he wanted to take out 13 billion fragments of consciousness, Gohan's soul would have to be forcefully split twice. Therefore, how to quickly repair his soul became the solution that Gohan had to solve. Naturally, the third sword of the 3 Green Lotus swords, the Green Lotus Soul Guide, once again appeared in Gohan's mind. In the past, in the seamless corridor, Gohan had also faced the predicament of exhausting his soul. As a result, Gohan had no choice but to have sex with Lu Qingping in order to recover his soul. At the same time, this was the main reason why Artoria and Gohan had parted ways. After all, no one could stand being cuckolded, much less a former king like King Arthur. But then again, the reason why King Arthur had died was because his wife had been cuckolded. This was fate. Although the last time he had used the Green Lotus Soul Guide, it had led to a great tragedy. Of course, Gohan would not give up eating for fear of choking. Therefore, he resolutely decided to use the Green Lotus Soul Guide again and borrow the power of a woman's primordial Een to repair his soul. This was why Gohan had taken the initiative to open the Shiraba. There was no other way. Apart from using Song Yifei's primordial Een to cultivate, Gohan really could not find any other woman to help him in a short period of time. Moreover, Gohan was not the kind of man who would just do anything. If the other party was not someone he loved, Gohan would not be willing to have sex with them so carelessly. Gohan was also a man with principles. However, Gohan did not expect that his actions would cause a dispute between Lu Shihua and Song Yifei. Because Lu Shihua was his disciple, Gohan instinctively excluded Lu Shihua and did not consider the possibility of letting Lu Shihua's virgin primordial Een help him. In the end, Lu Shihua and Song Yifei actually got into a fight. This made Gohan feel a bit of a headache. Matters between men and women, especially those between 3 men and women, Gohan was really not good at dealing with these. Compared to dealing with the dispute between Song Yifei and Lu Shihua, Gohan wanted to fight with 12 Zhu Wu more. It would be easier this way. Why don't you guys do it together? Gohan, who was feeling a headache, suddenly said this. Song Yifei and Lu Shihua fell silent at the same time. This man was too shameless. How could he say such a thing? What kind of person did he think Song Yifei was? How could he share a husband with another woman? Even if there was really no other way, it was impossible for 2 women to lie on the same bed. At least they had to sleep separately. Yes, Master. Just as Song Yifei was in a dilemma, Lu Shihua unexpectedly agreed immediately. At the same time, Lu Shihua began to take off his clothes. How can this woman be so shameless? Seeing the change at this time, Song Yifei's face couldn't help changing several times. She thought that Lu Shihua had an instinctive resistance to this matter like her, but she did not expect Lu Shihua to be so obedient. In fact, Song Yifei was still a little unclear about the relationship between Lu Shihua and Guhan. First of all, Lu Shihua had been trained by Guhan as an apprentice for several years. She had long been obedient to Guhan and regarded Guhan's orders as the truth. Even if Guhan asked Lu Shihua to commit suicide, Lu Shihua would immediately kill herself without hesitation for more than a minute, let alone give her body to Guhan. More importantly, Lu Shihua had always been looking for an opportunity to break through the relationship between master and apprentice. If she couldn't find this opportunity, she and Guhan would forever be a pure master and apprentice in this life. Therefore, facing such a sudden sentence from Guhan, Lu Shihua completely threw away all her shame and decided to seize this opportunity no matter what. Even if she had to share a husband with another woman, she had to break through the last line of defense with her master. This way, the relationship between master and apprentice would usher in a new turn for the better. On the other side, looking at Lu Shihua, who took the initiative to enter his tent, Guhan also hesitated. As Guhan hesitated, all of Lu Shihua's clothes had already been taken off, revealing that crystal body. Even if Guhan was unwilling to break through the relationship between him and Lu Shihua, he knew that it was not the time to let Lu Shihua put on his clothes. If he didn't do it, it would be a complete slap on Lu Shihua's face, and Lu Shihua's personality would probably collapse. Forget it, Guhan was not a guy who rigidly adhered to worldly etiquette. A disciple was a disciple. What else could Guhan have to worry about? Yifei, go somewhere nearby to relax. If you don't want to be with me anymore, you can leave now. I'm sorry. Guhan sighed and said to Song Yifei. Based on Guhan's understanding of Song Yifei, at this time, Song Yifei would probably feel very humiliated and choose to leave him, just like how Song Yifei left Yanjing City back then. However, Guhan couldn't do much because Guhan was really running out of time. No! Song Yifei clenched his teeth. Completely out of Guhan's expectation, he actually followed Lu Shihua into Guhan's tent. It doesn't matter to me if there are two. I'm just afraid that you can't take it, Song Yifei said bitterly as he took off his clothes. Chapter 1497. Of course, something very strange had happened in the tent. However, it could not be written in the main text. Otherwise, the book would be locked up again. All in all, when the tent was put away, there were 2 less girls in this world, and 2 more women. There was an inexplicable sense of sadness in it. And with the help of the rich Yin energy of the 2 immortal sword-rank beings, Guhan had successfully split his consciousness to the order of 20 billion. Guhan, what do we do next? Suddenly becoming a bride, Song Yifei's eyes were filled with tenderness and sweetness as she looked at Guhan and asked. This kind of tenderness and sweetness was quite hard for Guhan to bear. It was as if Song Yifei had completely changed into a different person. In contrast, Lu Shihua was exactly the same as before. Even though she had become Guhan's woman, Lu Shihua still looked like that obedient disciple of his. However, Guhan could feel that Lu Shihua's entire heart seemed to have changed. She was no longer the Lu Shihua of the past. Whether this change in their relationship was a good thing or a bad thing, even Guhan himself was not too sure. We're going back to Yuzhang City, Guhan said firmly. After dragging things out for so long, Guhan did not want to drag things out any longer. He had to rush back to Yuzhang City immediately and settle the things he had to do. Song Yifei and Lu Shihua naturally would not refuse. The 3 of them returned to the vicinity of Yuzhang City through the void. The moment they returned to Yuzhang City, the first thing that came into view was, of course, a devastated world. Unlike Yuzhang City, which was surrounded by mountains, The mountains within a radius of 200 kilometers around Yuzhong City were almost completely flattened. The Miling mountain range, where Guhan had left Yuzhong City for his first adventure, had now become a huge sinkhole. This mine that had supported Yuzhong City for hundreds of years had completely disappeared. It was not just the Miling mountain range. Almost all the mountains were gone. In their place were huge sinkholes that looked like the surface of the moon. This is all the work of the 12th Zhu Wu. Seeing the scenery that he was once so familiar with disappear, Guhan secretly clenched his fists and put all the blame on 12th Zhu Wu. What surprised Guhan was that there was no trace of the 12th Zhu Wu outside Yuzhong City, and the super-dimensional wall system of Yuzhong City had completely disappeared. Could it be that our dimensional barrier has already been destroyed by 12 Zhu Wu? Has Yuzhong City fallen? Lu Shihua asked in horror. In Lu Shihua's subconscious, once the dimensional barrier of a base city was destroyed, it meant that the city had most likely been invaded by Yuan Ko, and the people inside must have suffered heavy casualties. No, the dimensional barrier seems to have been abandoned by itself. Guhan roughly glanced at the surrounding environment and said with some confusion, "Look, the city wall of Yuzhong City is intact. There is no trace of damage, not even a trace of burn. It doesn't look like it was attacked by 12 Zhu Wu. And look, there are many people passing through the city gate. If it was Yuan Ko who broke it, the humans would not be so relaxed." Song Yifei and Lu Shihua both thought that what Guhan said made sense. But the problem was, if the dimensional barrier was not broken by Yuan Ko, how did it disappear? "I have a bad feeling. It seems that we have to go in and find out," Guhan said lightly, and at the same time, he took out a few pieces of pork from his dimensional pocket and threw them directly at Lu Shihua and Song Yifei's faces. "What are you doing, Guhan? Are you crazy?" Song Yifei said with hatred as he felt the wet smell of blood on his face. "I'm going to help you get a makeover." Guhan's face was solemn. "I'm afraid the three of us are famous in Yuzhong City, especially Shihua. There is no human in the world who doesn't know her. If we want to find out the truth, we'd better hide our identities. Otherwise, I think Ying Zheng will be very willing to meet us in advance." "Okay. Even if what you said makes sense. Why did you throw pork at my face? Do you think that throwing a few pieces of pork is like plastic surgery?" Before Song Yifei could finish, Guhan put a mirror in Song Yifei's hand. Song Yifei looked at the mirror and was shocked. Was the person in the mirror still herself? She used to be a young and adorable beauty, but now she had become a simple middle-aged woman. Her face was full of wrinkles, and she looked like she was overburdened with worry. Song Yifei looked at Lu Shihua again, and found that Lu Shihua had become a middle-aged woman with a scar on the right side of her face. Guhan had also changed his appearance. However, Guhan's age did not change much, but his appearance had completely changed from a handsome young man to a guy with a strange face. If Song Yifei had not smelled Guhan, he would not have recognized Guhan's true identity. "I used a fragment of my consciousness to control the nanomachines and did something to the pork on your faces. As long as you don't take the pork off yourself, I promise that no one will recognize you," Guhan said calmly. Although Song Yifei was a little dissatisfied with his appearance, he nodded and went into Yuzhong City with Guhan. "Ying Zheng is so shameless. He really wants to be the emperor and make all the humans in the world his slaves. Even if he has saved mankind, this is too much." Guhan and the other two said that they were refugees who had escaped from London. In addition, the management of Yuzhong City was in a mess, or rather, the basic management system had been lost. Therefore, it was easy for Guhan and the others to enter Yuzhong City. At the same time, by chatting with the citizens, they had a general understanding of what had happened in the past 2 months. When Guhan and the others arrived in Yuzhong City, it was already the 9th day after Zhu Wu was killed by Ying Zheng. It was also the day before Ying Zheng was going to ascend the throne in the central palace. After learning about this, Gohan was very glad that he had come back in time. If he had arrived 2 or 3 days later, Zhu Wu would have completely absorbed Ing Zheng's power, and Gohan's chances of winning would have been greatly reduced. After learning about what Ing Zheng had done, Lu Shihua, who loved the people as if they were his own children, nearly rushed straight into Ing Zheng's imperial palace, dragged him out, and gave him a good beating. It was not because Ing Zheng had framed him, but because Ing Zheng wanted to treat all the people under the heaven as his slaves, while he himself was the real emperor. In Lu Shihua's opinion, this was an unacceptable atrocity, and it was something that must be stopped. As for Gohan, after hearing about this, there was no obvious change in his expression. To some extent, Gohan somewhat agreed with Ing Zheng's decision and courage. Human beings did not need a terrible democracy. For human beings who were in danger, dictatorship was the best way to rule. Although the Sword Council could be counted as half a dictatorship, the power of a dictatorship was not enough. There were still many other factors that would restrict it. So, Gohan somewhat approved of Ing Zheng's centralization of power. But it was only a bit of approval. Gohan had never felt that the world belonged to anyone, or even to a single family. It was fine to want to rule humanity, but to want to treat humans like dogs, that was definitely not okay. So, after learning about Ing Zheng's methods, Gohan, who had originally planned to let Ing Zheng live because of his great contribution in saving humanity, retracted his somewhat naive thoughts. That's right, how is Frost Jiandi? Where does she live now? Is she also in the palace? After finding out about Ing Zheng, Gohan asked about Liuyan Ling. You're talking about Miss Ling. The old man, who had eaten a piece of flatbread from Gohan, told Gohan everything in detail. His face suddenly darkened. He didn't even want to eat the originally fragrant flatbread in his hand anymore. After letting out a long sigh, he faintly said, I'm sorry, I don't know where Miss Ling is right now. She seems to have disappeared. Disappeared. Gohan's heart jumped. At the same time, he had a bad premonition. He immediately asked, could it be that Frost Jiandi disappeared during the battle with the 12 Zhu Wu? That's not it. I heard that when the 12 Zhu Wu all died, Miss Ling was still alive. But after Ing Zheng, His Majesty announced his plan, Miss Ling completely disappeared. Actually, it doesn't matter if Miss Ling disappeared or not. I saw on TV that Miss Ling fought with the 12 Zhu Wu. She has completely lost the ability to reproduce and has become an 80 or 90-year-old woman. She's older than me by 20 or 30 years. Miss Ling doesn't have much longer to live. She might have already died of old age. Is that so? The old man suddenly felt the temperature around him drop by 10 degrees. He couldn't help but shiver from head to toe. When he raised his head to look for the child he had just been talking to, he found that the 3 people had already disappeared without a trace. I can't have seen a ghost, right? The old man couldn't help but shiver. He ate the flatbread in his hand in one bite and ran away from his original position. Gohan, don't be so angry, After asking around about the situation in Yuzhong City, he found that Gohan was in a depressed state. Song Yifei prepared to say a few words to comfort Gohan. We'll first go to the high-purity nuclear fuel warehouse and repair the captive immortal sword, Gohan said calmly. Yes, his tone was extremely calm. Chapter 1498. Gohan had learned how to turn the chaotic chi into chaotic power, and then use the chaotic power to repair the celestial trapping sword. Now, what was blocking the celestial trapping sword was enough chaotic power. Fortunately, Gohan was already prepared for this. When he left Shanhaiguan Pass and saved Yuzhong City from Yuan Ko for the second time, Gohan had already learned that the so-called chaotic chi was actually the high-purity nuclear fuel rods used in Yuzhong City's power generation, which were stored in the warehouse of Yuzhong City. At first, Gohan was a little worried that the nuclear fuel warehouse would be damaged by the attack of the 12 Zhu Wu. Since the 12 Zhu Wu did not even attack Yuzhong City, The nuclear fuel warehouse was naturally in a state of absolute safety. But what made Gohan a little angry was that the nuclear fuel warehouse, which was tightly guarded the last time he came, was almost defenseless now. Except for 2 gatekeepers who stayed at the sentry post at the entrance of the warehouse, the thousands of security personnel who were originally scattered around the warehouse had disappeared without a trace. As for the reason why these security personnel disappeared, Gohan did not need to ask. He could guess it with just a guess. The reason, of course, was that Ing Zheng was preparing to forcibly ascend to the throne, so he had mobilized all the personnel to build his palace. As for the nuclear fuel warehouse, naturally, no one was willing to guard it anymore. Anyway, this thing itself had absolute extremely strong defense capabilities, and it did not seem to be a problem in a short period of time. All of you, put up your personal shields. Otherwise, those high-purity nuclear fuel rods will destroy the flesh inside. Gohan snorted coldly and temporarily put these things aside. At the same time, he told Song Yifei and Lu Shihua. The 2 of them were also well aware of the terrifying damage that high-purity nuclear fuel rods could do to the human body. They did not dare to slack off. They took out their immortal-level sword maidens and put up their personal shields. Then, Gohan directly opened a void door and led the 2 directly into the warehouse. Not good, the warehouse has been robbed. The moment the 3 of them left the void and entered the warehouse, Lu Shihua immediately said in alarm. At this time, the warehouse of high-purity nuclear fuel rods could be said to be a mess. The high-purity nuclear fuel rods, which were originally neatly placed and protected by lead jackets, were now messily thrown on the ground. The metal brackets used to hold the high-purity fuel rods had all been dismembered. Judging from the twisted metal brackets, the person who did it seemed to have a certain level of brute force to be able to bend such a hard alloy. After checking the lead jackets on the ground, Lu Shihua was even more shocked to find that out of the 10 lead jackets, 9 were actually empty. In other words, about 9/10 of the high-purity nuclear fuel rods were gone, leaving only their lead jackets. Who is it? Who the hell did this? Does he want to destroy the human race? As a former leader of the human race, Lu Shihua said somewhat crazily when he realized that such an important thing had been stolen. If other things were lost, then so be it. At most, they would just lose some wealth. But high-purity nuclear fuel rods were not ordinary things. If one of them was taken out, it could cause the death of tens of thousands of people. According to calculations, as long as the distribution was reasonable enough, the 86 high-purity nuclear fuel rods would be enough to kill all the ordinary people in Yuzhong City. Such a dangerous thing had actually been lost. How could Lu Shihua not be frightened and angry? This could be a crisis that could lead to the extinction of the entire human race. It's okay. The situation might not be that bad. Gohan's expression was a little playful. Facing the messy warehouse, Gohan did not seem to have too much worry. Instead, there was a faint smile on his face, as if he had already figured out who the thief was. Master, do you already know something? Lu Shihua, who could be said to be very familiar with his master, immediately reacted after seeing Gohan's expression. It seemed that his master already had clues. I'm just guessing something. As Gohan spoke, he paced around the entire warehouse. After going around the entire warehouse, he finally stopped at a place that looked very shiny. Oh my God! Who did this? They actually removed all the barrier crystals on the wall. Lu Shihua exclaimed again after seeing this pile of shiny things. When the warehouse was built, in order to prevent the radiation of high-purity nuclear fuel rods from leaking out, the entire warehouse was set up with a total of 24 layers of protection. One of the core layers of protection was the row of barrier crystals directly embedded in the warehouse. These crystals were smelted with special materials. As long as these crystals were embedded in the wall, they could block up to 95% of the radiation of high-purity nuclear fuel rod. It could be said to be the core of the entire warehouse's defense measures. At first, Lu Shihua's attention was focused on the high-purity nuclear fuel rods scattered on the ground, and he did not pay attention to the barrier crystals on the wall. Only now did he realize that the barrier crystals on the wall had been removed and then neatly piled up in this corner of the warehouse. This murderer must want to destroy mankind. Lu Shihua cried out. In Lu Shihua's opinion, this murderer must want to use radiation to destroy mankind. Otherwise, if the murderer did not want to destroy mankind, why would he remove these barrier crystals embedded in the wall? These barrier crystals had no other use other than blocking radiation. If they were sold, their value might not even be as high as a glass bead. Moreover, these barrier crystals were embedded in the wall. Even if an ordinary person wanted to remove a crystal, even with the help of tools, it might take them 1 or 2 hours. But now that all the barrier crystals in the entire warehouse had been removed, how much effort and time did the murderer have to spend to do this? If they did not want to destroy mankind, why would they go through so much trouble to do this? Therefore, Lu Shihua's mood became extremely fearful. Now that almost all the survivors of mankind had gathered in Yuzhang City, the density of people living in the city was frighteningly high. Once these high-purity nuclear fuel rods were taken out, the original 400 million survivors of mankind would probably be reduced to 4 million at most. Don't worry. I have studied the nuclear fuel warehouse. There are 24 lines of defense in this warehouse. Even if there is only one left, it can still block more than 90% of the radiation. I just checked the other defenses. Other than the first barrier crystal that was destroyed by someone, the rest of the defenses are still intact. The radiation that leaked out is less than 1,000th of its original level. It definitely won't pose a threat to humans. Gu Han said indifferently. That's right. But we can't just let this matter go like this. We must immediately find out who the thief is, otherwise the entire human race will be in absolute danger. Lu Shihua said with extreme unease. That's easy. If my guess is correct, the thief should still be in the warehouse, Gu Han said with a smile. What? Lu Shihua immediately tensed up. At the same time, he began to search the entire warehouse with sword energy, wanting to find the thief that his master said was hiding. Don't bother, the thief is right here. After Gu Han finished speaking, he suddenly stretched his arm directly into the barrier crystal, and then pulled outwards, directly pulling out a doll-like little person from the barrier crystal pile. A little girl. When Lu Shihua saw clearly what Gu Han had pulled out from the pile of barrier crystals, he suddenly screamed. Because the thing in Gu Han's hand was actually a little girl. Looking closely, it was a little girl with a big round face and thick short legs. She was extremely cute. However, what Lu Shihua did not understand was why there was such a cute little girl in such a dangerous place. Also, how did this little girl become the thief of the high-purity nuclear fuel rod? Shihua, this is not a little girl. This is a Yuan Ko, and it is a Hong-level Yuan Ko. Compared to Lu Shihua's confusion, Song Yifei reacted immediately and stared at the little girl in Gu Han's hand with extreme vigilance. Yuan Ko. Lu Shihua was stunned for a moment. Then, Lu Shihua saw a small tail hanging down from the little loli's buttock. It was sandwiched between her legs, and there was a small furry ball at the top. Naturally, it was impossible for a human to have a tail. This little loli must be a Yuan Ko. Master, be careful. This is a Yuan Ko. Lu Shihua immediately reminded his master. I know it's okay. We are old acquaintances. Gu Han smiled slightly, then reached out and grabbed the little girl's tail. At the same time, he squeezed the furry ball hard. Wow, this feeling, it's an addictive feeling. Feeling the softness and comfort of the furry in his hand, Gu Han could not help but sigh. It had been more than 20 years since he had touched something so good. Oh no, someone actually dared to touch Kong Na's tail. Kong Na wants to eat him. At the same time that Gu Han squeezed hard, the little girl, who was originally sleeping, was awakened. One had to know that for a dragon, The tail was always one of the most sensitive parts, not to mention that this was Kong Na's tail. Therefore, Kong Na woke up immediately and was ready to teach this guy who dared to touch her tail a lesson. However, after a while, Kong Na realized that something was wrong. It was as if she was being grabbed by someone's hand. Oh, this is too abominable. This is simply incredible. Someone actually dared to grab Kong Na's neck. Kong Na must teach him a good lesson. With this thought, Kong Na prepared to send a bolt of lightning to this reckless guy. But when Kong Na saw the person's face clearly, the lightning that was gathering in her hand instantly disappeared without a trace. At the same time, the angry little face immediately turned into a cute look. Master Gohan, you are back. Don't tell me you want to ride Kong Na again, Kong Na said with a wronged expression. Our Kong Na was born this cute. I don't want to be cute to get away with it. Chapter 1499. There's no need for that at the moment. Gohan threw Kong Na back to the ground. When Kong Na heard that Gohan didn't plan to ride her, she immediately stood up happily and wagged her tail excitedly. Why are you here? Didn't you promise me that you would live near Yuzhong City and protect the safety of Yuzhong City? Why are you hiding here? Gohan knocked on Kong Na's little head and said with dissatisfaction. It's not Kong Na's fault, Master Gohan. Kong Na said aggrievedly. They haven't sent Kong Na food for 5 years. Kong Na is about to starve to death, so Kong Na can only come in to find food herself. Kong Na. Lu Shihua, who was at the side, found the name familiar. After trying hard to recall, he looked at Gohan in surprise and said, Master, this little lowly can't be the Thunder Dragon that you brought me to see in the past, right? Of course it's her. Who else could it be other than her? Gohan said indifferently. That year, before entering the seamless corridor, Gohan had brought Lu Shihua to find Kong Na. He told Lu Shihua about the agreement between him and Kong Na, and told Lu Shihua to remember to provide Kong Na with enough high-purity nuclear fuel rods. But at that time, Kong Na had been in her dragon form to meet Lu Shihua. Lu Shihua didn't know that after that mighty dragon transformed into human form, it would actually become this cute little lowly. This contrast was a little too cute. It was worth mentioning that when Gohan and Kong Na made the agreement, it was in the form of a female, Gu Xianyuan. Gohan had originally thought that he would have to spend a lot of effort to make Kong Na understand who he was, but in the end, Kong Na was able to instantly recognize him. According to Kong Na herself, every living being had electric currents within their bodies, and every bioelectric current was completely different. She was able to distinguish different people through the differences in electric currents. The bioelectric currents within Gohan and Gu Xianyuan's bodies were exactly the same, which was why Kong Na was able to recognize Gohan at first glance. I'm sorry, Miss Kong Na. 5 years ago I was framed. I didn't have time to explain to you, so no one sent you food, Lu Shihua said to Kong Na guiltily. Back then, Gohan had given Lu Shihua the role of feeding Kong Na, but in order to keep it a secret, Lu Shihua took charge of the job himself. In the end, after Lu Shihua went missing, Kong Na lost her source of food. Wait, how did you get in here? From the looks of it, you've been here for at least a few years. Back then, Yuzhong City's dimensional barrier was still around. How did you sneak in? Gohan said as he pinched Kong Na's tail. Big sister let me in. Kong Na frowned, feeling wronged. She didn't like the feeling of having her tail held in someone's hand. But when she recalled how she was beaten up by Gohan, Kong Na wisely chose to endure it. I was going to ask for food, but I met Big Sister. I told Big Sister about my situation, and she let me stay here. Big Sister said that I can eat all the food here. Big Sister? You're talking about Liuyan Ling, right? Gohan revealed an expression of sudden realization. Not only did Gohan tell Lu Shihua about Kong Na's existence, but Liuyan Ling also knew about Kong Na's existence. But Liuyan Ling was a little too generous. She actually left such a glutton in the warehouse. Wasn't she afraid that Kong Na would eat all the high-purity fuel rods? If Liuyan Ling knew that Kong Na could eat so much that she ate 90% of the nuclear fuel rods in the warehouse in 5 years, she wouldn't have dared to let Kong Na in. I'm hungry again. After talking to Gu Han for a long time, Kong Na seemed to have exhausted a lot of energy. She directly picked up half of the high-purity nuclear fuel rod from the ground, and in the horrified eyes of Lu Shihua and Song Yifei, she ate the whole high-purity nuclear fuel rod like eating a lollipop. After a crunch, she swallowed the entire high-purity nuclear fuel rod. Do you want some? It's delicious. After Kong Na finished eating, she did not forget about her new friend. She picked up another 2 high-purity nuclear fuel rods and handed them to Song Yifei and Lu Shihua. She looked at them expectantly, hoping that they could accept her friendship and eat the delicious high-purity nuclear fuel rods in one bite. Thank you. No need. Song Yifei and Lu Shihua wouldn't dare to eat a high-purity fuel rods even if they had 10 gut. Although they were sword wielders at the sword immortal level, they were still humans. If they ate a high-purity fuel rods, their lives would be over. Don't you like Kong Na? You don't want to eat what Kong Na gives you. When Kong Na heard Song Yifei and Lu Shihua's rejection, Feng Gongzhong immediately had tears in her eyes. She looked at the 2 unlucky children pitifully. It was as if they had committed a heinous crime if they didn't eat Kong Na's food. Why don't we take a bite? Facing Kong Na's extremely adorable gaze, the 2 of them actually had the thought of taking a bite in their hearts. That's enough. How can they eat this? You eat it. Guhan pinched Kong Na's furry little tail, then grabbed the 2 high-purity fuel rods from Kong Na's hands. Just like Kong Na, he ate one of the high-purity fuel rods in one bite. Guhan, you're crazy. Master. Seeing that Guhan ate the 2 high-purity fuel rods, Song Yifei and Lu Shihua immediately exclaimed. Was Guhan crazy? Did he want to die? Don't worry. This is just a necessary step to refine the power of chaos. Guhan smiled and explained to the 2 girls who were concerned about him. The 2 girls also remembered that Guhan had indeed learned the method to refine the power of chaos from the saint's relic, and the high-purity fuel rods were the raw material to refine the power of chaos. However, the 2 girls didn't expect the method to refine the high-purity fuel rods to be so violent that they had to be eaten directly. I'm going to refine the power of chaos now. You 2 watch Kong Na, don't let her cause trouble. Guhan casually ordered Song Yifei, then sat cross-legged on the ground. Although the fuel rods were already in his stomach, Guhan obviously couldn't refine the 2 high-purity fuel rods immediately. According to the method on the saint's relic, Guhan had to use his own consciousness fragment to fuse and decompose the impure acquired elements in the high-purity fuel rods to obtain the purest power of chaos. Guhan meditated for an hour. When Guhan slowly opened his eyes, the next second, Guhan immediately grabbed the celestial trapping sword in its scabbard and directly injected a light blue light into the celestial trapping sword. When the blue light on the surface of the celestial trapping sword dissipated, it seemed to be more lively than before. You 3 take a look. How is celestial trapping sword now? Guhan released the 3 sword ladies, celestial extinguishing sword, celestial slaying sword, and celestial slayer sword, and let them observe his poor sister. She does look better than before. Our method is correct. The power of chaos can indeed repair the celestial trapping sword. Celestial slaying sword and the other 2 carefully observed their sister a few times before speaking to Guhan. Is that so? A hint of joy appeared on Guhan's face. What Guhan was most afraid of was that the power of chaos could not repair the celestial trapping sword. If that happened, all his previous efforts would basically be in vain. But, in the next second, a worried expression appeared on Celestial Slaying Sword's face. What's wrong? Is there anything wrong? Looking at Celestial Slaying Sword's expression, Guhan's expression also changed. It's not that there's anything wrong. It's just that celestial trapping sword's injuries are much more serious than we thought. So much power of chaos was injected into her just now, but it seems like it only replenished about 2% of the consumption, Celestial Slaying Sword said. Only 2%. Gohan's expression immediately changed. This was really a terrible situation. Just now, in order to refine 2 high-purity nuclear fuel rods, Gohan had already spent an hour. In other words, Gohan could only replenish 2% of Celestial Trapping Sword's energy in an hour. In order for the Celestial Trapping Sword to really return to the level of an Emperor Sword, it would take more than 2 days. However, according to the description on the Saint's relic, the 12 Zhu Wu's blood pearls would only need 10 days in Ying Zheng's body to completely hatch. In other words, the 12 Zhu Wu's time to break away from Ying Zheng should be tomorrow. This was also the best opportunity for Gohan to defeat the 12 Zhu Wu. This was because the 12 Zhu Wu's resurrection would continue to grow stronger as time passed. By then, the 12 Zhu Wu's would probably not be someone that Gohan could deal with. If he wanted to defeat the 12 Zhu Wu's, his only chance was tomorrow. Gohan definitely could not drag it to the next day. Otherwise, everything would be over. However, the huge problem of the purification speed of the high-purity nuclear fuel rods was in front of Gohan. For a while, Gohan could not think of any good way to speed up his purification speed. Because of this, Gohan felt a great headache. He was about to take the risk and try to eat multiple high-purity nuclear fuel rods at the same time to refine them. However, if he did that, Gohan would have to take a great risk. This was because Gohan's body could barely withstand 2 high-purity nuclear fuel rods. Once the number exceeded this limit, Gohan would not be able to refine them, and his internal organs might even be burned by the high-purity nuclear fuel rods. Even if Gohan did not die and could repair his body on his own, the refining speed of the high-purity nuclear fuel rods was bound to be reduced. Thump! Just as Gohan was struggling with this, the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground was suddenly heard. This was followed by a tremor in the entire warehouse, as if there was an earthquake. On the other side, Kong Na touched her bald little head and said calmly, "Hey, they changed the role again." Chapter 1500. Kong Na, do dragons still change their horns? Song Yifei asked curiously when he saw the 2 sharp dragon horns on Kong Na's head fall off. No. Kong Na shook her head, feeling wronged. Other dragons don't seem to change their horns, but I, Kong Na, am the only one who is so unlucky. Kong Na picked up the 2 dragon horns that had fallen to the ground. At that moment, it could be seen that on Kong Na's head, there were 2 new, small white dragon horns with a pointed tip. This looks exactly the same as changing teeth. It's all new teeth pushing out old teeth. Song Yifei looked at Kong Na's 2 new dragon horns and said curiously, "Kong Na, how long do you usually change your dragon horns? I heard that creatures like dragons can easily take tens of thousands of years." Song Yifei continued, "That's how it is." Kong Na's short hand touched the protruding new dragon horns on her head, then pouted and said, "Originally, it would take me 5,000 years to change a pair of dragon horns, but it's been weird lately. For the past few years, I've been changing my dragon horns almost every year. I don't know why either." "Kong Na, you're not sick, are you?" Song Yifei rolled his eyes and immediately said with concern, "I'm a doctor. I can tell you with certainty that you must be sick if you change your body parts so quickly that it goes against the laws of biology. Oh yes, you might have some kind of endocrine disorder, prostate hyperplasia, cervical erosion, or something like that." "What? That's scary." Kong Na was shocked by Song Yifei's words. Endocrine disorder, prostate hyperplasia, cervical erosion. These names sounded like terrifying incurable diseases, which scared our innocent little lowly Kangana to death. "It's okay, I'm a doctor, I can help you." Song Yifei held back her laughter, and said to Kong Na with the seriousness of a doctor, Come, Kong Na, I'll show you the unique skill of traditional Chinese medicine, checking the tail pulse. Listen to me, as long as I rub your tail for more than 10 minutes, I can find out all the problems in your body. As long as I know what illness you have, I can prescribe the right medicine and cure your body. I see. Kong Na fell into hesitation. To Kong Na, who was born with a sensitive tail, it was indeed a matter worthy of careful consideration. All right. In the end, Kong Na's fear of prostatic hyperplasia overcame everything else. She obediently handed her tail to Song Yifei, and Song Yifei held the furry tail with a satisfied expression. Oh my God! No wonder Gohan likes to touch Kong Na's tail so much. The feeling of her tail is just too wonderful. In this world, there's nothing better than being ridden by Gohan. Song Yifei exclaimed in his heart, completely unaware that there seemed to be something strange in his words. While Song Yifei was immersed in the wonderful feeling of Kong Na's tail, Kong Na was frowning and enduring the pain of her tail being tortured by someone. She didn't even notice that someone had walked up to her and taken away the 2 dragon horns in her hand. This is... Gohan was just a little curious about the dragon horns that Kong Na had replaced, so he took them to have a look. As a result, Gohan was shocked. He immediately took the dragon horn and walked to a corner, then directly put the dragon horn into his mouth and bit hard. Ouch! Gohan couldn't help but let out a cry of pain, then spat out 2 bloody teeth from his mouth. Master, what's wrong with you? Hearing Gohan's cry of pain, Lu Shihua immediately ran over and asked nervously. It's nothing. Master was stupid, Gohan said with a bitter smile. In fact, it was indeed Gohan who was stupid. Perhaps Gohan was too excited and wanted to eat these 2 things directly. In the end, Gohan forgot that what he was holding in his hand was not the crunchy, mothball-flavored high-purity nuclear fuel rod from before, but 2 real dragon horns. Dragon horns could be said to be the hardest part of a dragon's body. Even if Gohan's body had reached the level of an emperor's sword, it was impossible for him to bite off these dragon horns with his teeth. However, it was unrealistic to directly eat such a long dragon horn into one's stomach. In desperation, Gohan could only take out the Zhuxian sword and use the mysterious 9 swords to slash at the dragon horn. Then, the dragon horn still didn't move at all. This thing is really hard. Seeing that the mysterious 9 swords did not work, Gohan had no choice but to use the killer move of the Chaos Sword technique. Only then did he manage to cut off a small piece of the dragon horn. Then, Gohan directly swallowed it into his stomach. It really works. Gohan's eyes lit up, and he immediately began to meditate and refine the dragon horn in his stomach. After a few minutes, Gohan woke up again. At the same time, he cut the dragon horn into 8 pieces and then ate them all piece by piece. When Gohan completely refined the 2 dragon horns and at the same time, he injected chaotic energy into the celestial trapping sword. After knowing that the celestial trapping sword's repair rate had reached 27%, his face immediately showed an expression of joy. The moment he picked up these 2 dragon horns, Gohan was surprised to find that the material of these 2 dragon horns was not ordinary. These 2 dragon horns looked very ordinary, but Gohan could feel chaotic energy from these dragon horns that was more powerful than the nuclear fuel rods. These dragon horns themselves seemed to be solidified by chaotic energy. Therefore, Gohan immediately realized that if he did not refine the high-purity nuclear fuel rods and directly refine these 2 dragon horns, would there be a higher efficiency? As soon as he thought of it, Gohan immediately began to experiment. As it turned out, the dragon horns that Kong Na had replaced could indeed be directly refined into chaotic energy, and the ease of refining was far greater than the difficulty of refining high-purity nuclear fuel rods. During the refining, Gohan found that Kong Na's dragon horns were actually more refined high-purity nuclear fuel rods, but many of the impurities in them had been eliminated, leaving only the purest chaotic energy. This saved Gohan a lot of time. When refining the high-purity nuclear fuel rods before, Guhan used almost 3/4 of the time to remove the impurities in the high-purity nuclear fuel rods, and the dragon horns themselves were a collection of high-purity chaotic energy, so naturally, it saved Guhan a lot of time. According to Guhan's estimation, refining these 2 dragon horns took about 4 hours, and at the same time, 27% of the celestial trapping sword was repaired. He believed that if he could get 6 more of the same dragon horns, then Guhan could completely repair the celestial trapping sword in a day. Thinking of this, Guhan immediately walked to Kong Na's side and rescued Kong Na, whose tail was still in the hands of Song Yifei. Then, he gently touched Kong Na's little head and said softly, "Kong Na, you said that you change a pair of dragon horns every year, right?" "Yes, Master Guhan. Don't look at Kong Na like that. Kong Na is scared. Is it wrong for Kong Na to change horns? How about Kong Na let you ride me?" Kong Na looked at Guhan in horror and said. It was really rare to see a gentle expression on Guhan's face. Not to mention Kong Na, even Song Yifei would be afraid if he saw it. "Ahem. Give me the dragon horns that you changed, and I promise not to ride you." Guhan coughed and Kong Na nodded hard. Then, she went straight into the pile of blocking crystals. After a long time, she finally took out the dragon horns that she had accumulated. Not to mention, there were exactly 6 left. It seemed that these were all the dragon horns that Kong Na had changed in the past 5 years. "You really changed so many." Seeing so many dragon horns with his own eyes, Song Yifei could not help but exclaim. Then, he looked at Kong Na and threatened, "You're finished. Your cervical erosion has reached the late stage. Hurry up and hand over your tail, let me treat you." "What? No. Kong Na, I don't want my tail to be grabbed again." Kong Na threw away the dragon horns in her hand and directly rode on Guhan's neck, avoiding Song Yifei's naughty hands. "Alright, stop scaring Kong Na." Guhan rolled his eyes at Song Yifei, then grabbed Kong Na from his neck. This little girl kept saying that she did not want to be Guhan's mount, but now, she was riding on Guhan as her mount. But Kong Na is really sick. Otherwise, why would she change her dragon horns so frequently? Song Yifei pouted and said playfully. "That's because Kong Na, this idiot, eats too much." Guhan knocked on Kong Na's head and said, "You little idiot, every day you stuff high-purity nuclear fuel rods into your mouth. The amount you eat in a day is equivalent to the amount you used to eat in a month. The dragon horns on your head were originally formed from the indigestible leftovers after digesting the high-purity nuclear fuel rod. In the past, it took 5,000 years to gather the materials needed for 2 dragon horns, but now it only took 1 year. Of course, you have to change your horns. Based on the refinement of Kong Na's dragon horns just now, Guhan easily figured out the reason behind it. It turned out that Kong Na had eaten too much. With the other 6 dragon horns that Kong Na had replaced in the past 5 years, Guhan's refinement of the chaotic energy began to go smoothly. Very soon, the celestial trapping sword was restored to 95%. It seemed that in another 10 minutes, the celestial trapping sword could completely return to the level of an emperor sword. At that moment, with the loud sound of gongs and drums outside the warehouse, Ying Zheng's coronation ceremony had begun at the same time. Chapter 1501. Guhan, that guy is about to become the emperor. Are you still not going to show yourself? Song Yifei said to Guhan excitedly when she heard the noise outside the warehouse. Unfortunately, Guhan was still immersed in Kong Na's dragon horn. There was only a little time left before the celestial trapping sword could be repaired. Of course, Guhan would not show up at this time to deal with Ying Zheng. He had to repair the celestial trapping sword first. "Xihua, it's so boring here. Let's go out for a walk." Song Yifei immediately turned to Lu Xihua when she saw that she couldn't do anything to Guhan. After experiencing the 3 of them being honest with each other, the relationship between Song Yifei and Lu Xihua was naturally different. Lu Shihua had already become Song Yifei's best friend. Master, Lu Shihua actually wanted to go out for a walk. After all, this was Yuzhang City that had raised her for so many years. Lu Shihua really wanted to know what was happening in Yuzhang City. But when she saw her master sitting cross-legged on the ground, meditating, Lu Shihua could not help but show a look of hesitation. Was it really good to leave her master here alone? TSK, are you still afraid that something will happen to him? In this world, other than him, who else has the ability to bully him? Song Yifei grabbed Lu Shihua's little hand and said. Lu Shihua could not help but nod at Song Yifei's words. Indeed, with Gohan's current ability, there was indeed no one in this world who could bully him. Her master did not need anyone's protection at all. Shihua, you haven't gotten the 12-winged angel's sword yet, right? Gohan's time is precious. We can't let him waste it on this. Why don't we go get the 12-winged angel's sword first so that Gohan doesn't have to waste his time? Song Yifei's words could be said to be the most urgent thought in Lu Shihua's heart. She really could not wait to find her 12-winged angel's sword and become the emperor. Lu Shihua felt that the gap between her and her master was getting bigger and bigger. Only by becoming the emperor could she close the gap between them. Lu Shihua could not wait anymore. Alright, let's go find the 12-winged angel sword first. Lu Shihua nodded in the end. Song Yifei immediately opened the void gate. However, when the two of them walked out of the void gate, they found that there were three of them. Sister Yifei. Sister Shihua. Kong Na is so bored staying in the warehouse alone. Can you guys take Kong Na out to play? Kong Na rode on Song Yifei's neck and begged him with an adorable expression. No problem. Song Yifei could not stand such a cute expression and immediately nodded in agreement. Soon, the three of them walked toward the direction of the sword pavilion. Because the dragon's horns had fallen off, there were only two small white horns on Kong Na's head. They looked like two white hair clips and didn't arouse the suspicion of the onlookers in the core area. In fact, even if the dragon's horns were still there, Kong Na probably wouldn't arouse any suspicion. This was because most of the people in the core area were rubbing their stomachs and constantly making pitiful wails. These people could only get a simple meal of porridge every day. They didn't even have the strength to speak on such meager food, let alone have the mood to observe other people's heads. Ying Jing, that son of AB*TCH. Such a rich Yuzhang city, such a rich human population, what have they become in his hands? That son of AB*TCH, how dare he ascend the throne? Lu Shihua angrily punched the wall next to him when he saw this miserable scene. When Lu Shihua was in power, the entire human society was closely managed by Lu Shihua, and the people's living standards increased by about 30%. At the same time, because Lu Shihua was born in the slums, he greatly increased the living supplies for the people in the slums and did his best to help them get out of poverty. At the same time, by issuing different tasks, he tried his best to guide the sword-bearers to focus on improving the people's livelihood, creating more safe zones and farmlands outside the city, instead of wasting them on the pursuit and annihilation of Yuan Ko. As a result, human food production increased significantly, and the dimensional pocket of Yanjing City once stored enough food to feed the people of Yanjing City for 10 years. It was such a flourishing human society, but when it was handed over to Yingzheng, there was such a scene of people living in poverty. How could Lu Shihua not be angry? It's probably because of the 12 Zhu Wu's invasion. After all, 7 of the 8 base cities were destroyed, and the food supply was almost depleted. It's normal for people to not have enough to eat, Song Yifei said. She was not defending Yingzheng, but simply stating the speculation in her heart. Miss Yifei, you don't know, except for Yanjing City, all the other human bases have been conquered. We humans have long learned how to deal with it, and we know that food is the most important thing for humans. Therefore, before the city is conquered, we will transport all the food in this city to another safe city through the dimensional pocket. A sword bearer of sword immortal level can carry hundreds of large dimensional pockets at the same time, and each large dimensional pocket can contain 10 million tons of food. A few hundred dimensional pockets will contain hundreds of millions of tons of food, which is enough to transport all the food in the entire base city. Therefore, even if the human bases have been conquered countless times, the food has never been lost. Someone as smart as Ingzheng must have thought that this day would come. Of all the food, only about 10% to 20% of it has been lost at most. Most of the food should still be in Ingzheng's control. Before I fell into a coma, the food stored in the 8 bases was enough for the entire human race to eat for 10 years. But now, the human population has been reduced by half, and there are already people dying of hunger everywhere. If I'm not wrong, this food must have been hidden by Ingzheng. I know this guy too well. He likes to control everything in his hand. And if he wants to control the entire human race, other than absolute power, the least he can do is to control the food. This damned beast, for the sake of his own power, he has abandoned so many human lives. The more Lu Shihua spoke, the angrier she became. She could not wait to rush to Ingzheng and give him a slap. Forget it, let him be happy for now. Gohan will naturally deal with him. It is more important for us to find the sword of the seraphim. Song Yifei said to Lu Shihua, and Lu Shihua could only nod helplessly. In fact, Lu Shihua knew that he was no match for Ingzheng. Only by finding the sword of the seraphim could he truly kill Ingzheng. Along the way, they carefully avoided the crowds on the ground, and finally arrived at the sword tower in Yuzhong City. But compared to the sword tower that Lu Shihua was very familiar with, the current sword tower looked completely different. About half of the buildings had disappeared, and even the roofs were gone. Only some broken walls were left, a testament to the sword tower's former existence. At the same time, Lu Shihua also noticed that there were all kinds of refugees lying on the ground in the ruins of the sword tower. They were huddled tightly on a small piece of ground, leaning against the wall, as if the wall could bring them a little bit of security. Who was it? Who tore down my sword pavilion? Seeing the scene before him, Lu Shihua clenched his fists in anger. As the former sword tower master, although the sword tower had brought Lu Shihua a lot of suffering, it was also the most profound memory in Lu Shihua's life. The sword tower was like Lu Shihua's home. Seeing his home reduced to such a state, one could imagine the anger in Lu Shihua's heart. In the end, before Song Yifei could stop them in time, countless streams of sword cheese shot out from Lu Shihua's scabbard, all of them slashing down onto the ground and kicking up a large amount of dust. The surrounding refugees were scared out of their wits as they looked at Lu Shihua and Song Yifei, the two sword-wielders who seemed to have gone mad. In fact, Lu Shihua still retained some of his rationality. In the end, he controlled the sword auras to slash at the gaps in the ground. If Lu Shihua had really gone mad, there would have been at least hundreds of casualties in the vicinity. Who is it? Who's causing trouble here? Using sword auras, is he trying to kill people? Naturally, the great commotion in the vicinity of the sword pavilion had attracted the attention of the nearby sword bearers. However, as most of the sword bearers had gone to the imperial palace to attend Ingzheng's coronation ceremony, only one sword bearer came to deal with the matter. It's him. Seeing the sword bearer who suddenly appeared, Song Yifei and Lu Shihua's faces showed some surprise at the same time. Not only did they know this sword-bearer, but they were also old acquaintances. Ku Rock-in, it's you. Song Yifei couldn't help but cry out. You know me. Song Yifei knew Ku Rock-in, but Ku Rock-in didn't know Song Yifei. Firstly, it had been 20 years, and Song Yifei's figure was no longer the same as before. Secondly, the disguise that Gohan put on their faces was still effective. To Ku Rock-in, Song Yifei was just an ordinary woman. Ahem, who doesn't know Sword Immortal Baiju's son? Only then did Song Yifei realize that she couldn't reveal her true identity, so she blurted out an explanation. You actually still remember my father? When Ku Rock-in heard this unfamiliar woman, Song Yifei, mention his father's title, he immediately sighed with mixed feelings. 20 years had passed, and the leader of Yuzhong City, Sword Immortal Baiju, had long since disappeared from the public's conversation. Apart from the occasional commemorative activities and the idle chatter of the older generation, Sword Immortal Baiju's name had disappeared for a long time. As a result, it had been 34 years since Ku Rock-in heard his father's title from a stranger's mouth. Now, he was shocked to find out that there was still someone who remembered his father, and even knew that he was his son. Naturally, all sorts of feelings welled up in him, and his impression of Song Yifei also improved. His attitude softened a little as he asked, "What are the two of you doing here? Why did you hurt someone?" Chapter 1502. We didn't hurt anyone. Look, there's not even a drop of blood around. My daughter controlled herself well just now. Although she released a lot of sword chi, they all hit the ground. She didn't hurt anyone. Song Yifei explained with a smile. At the same time, he turned Lu Shihua into his own daughter. You! Lu Shihua glared at Song Yifei. Song Yifei gave Lu Shihua a look that said, "Be sensible." Because of Gohan's makeup, Song Yifei looked like an old lady in her 60s or 70s, while Lu Shihua looked like a middle-aged woman in her 40s or 50s. They really looked like a mother and daughter. Seeing Song Yifei's look, Lu Shihua could only snort and play along with Song Yifei. Both of you are sword-bearers? Ku Rock-in looked at Song Yifei and Lu Shihua and asked curiously. Yes. Song Yifei nodded. Since the two of you are sword-bearers, you should know the rules of the sword-bearers. Don't throw a tantrum in the future. It would be bad if you hurt others. Take care. Since no one was hurt, Ku Rock-in didn't want to care about it anymore. He was ready to leave after saying that. Wait. Song Yifei grabbed Ku Rock-in's arm and asked anxiously, "Brother, can you tell us where the sword ladies are? We are in a hurry to find some." Why are you looking for sword ladies? Ku Rock-in was shocked and asked with a frown. It's like this. My granddaughter is already 18 years old. I wanted to see if she had the talent to become a sword bearer, so I wanted to hold a contract ceremony in the sword pavilion to test it out. But as soon as I arrived, I found that the entire sword pavilion had been emptied and turned into this. What happened here? Where are the sword maidens inside? Song Yifei lifted Kong Na, who was riding on his neck, and waved her in front of Ku Rock-in. Kong Na, who was tens of thousands of years old, became Song Yifei's granddaughter. This child is 18 years old. Ku Rock-in was shocked by Kong Na. Kong Na looked like she was at most 8 or 9 years old. It was impossible to tell that she was an 18-year-old girl. It can't be helped. My daughter's husband is too irresponsible. He married my daughter, but he still messed around with other women. As a result, my daughter was heartbroken when she was pregnant. This granddaughter is born with a congenital defect. She's still the same height at the age of 18. The doctor said it's a genetic problem and there's no way to cure it. Song Yifei lied. I see. If your grandmother and mother are both sword bearers, the chances of your granddaughter being a sword bearer are indeed very high. If it were any other time, you would really come to the sword garret to test it out. But unfortunately, it's all over now. All the natural sword ladies in the sword garret in Yuzhong City have been taken away. If you really want to help your granddaughter synchronize, then write a memorial to His Majesty Yingzheng and apply for it. Ku Rock-in shook his head helplessly. Although Ku Rock-in addressed Yingzheng as His Majesty, his tone was full of sarcasm. Even a fool could tell that he was mocking Yingzheng. What's going on? Since when do we need Yingzheng's approval to synchronize the sword bearers? Has Yingzheng forgotten the rules of the sword committee? Lu Shihua, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly said angrily. Rules? Rules of the Sword Committee? Ku Rakin sneered, then let out a long sigh and said, ever since President Shihua died, we humans have no rules. Now that Ing Zheng has ascended to the throne, his rules are our rules. There's no longer any rules of the Sword Committee. According to the rules set by Ing Zheng, everyone must first become Ing Zheng's people and submit a memorial to him. As for those who want to become sword bearers, they have to go through many twists and turns to apply to Ing Zheng. Only after getting the approval from His Majesty, Ing Zheng, can they conduct synchronized experiments with the Sword Maiden. This is the new rule, understand? After Ku Rakin finished, his nose twitched. He asked curiously, these rules have been announced for more than 10 days. Haven't you heard about it? No, we just escaped from London yesterday. We were going to fight the 12 ancestors of sorcery, but we found out that the 12 ancestors of sorcery were dead, and Yuzhang City has become like this. We are still confused. Song Yifei squinted and explained. Now you know it, right? All right, if you really want your granddaughter to synchronize with the experiment, wait until this farce is over, then submit a memorial to Ing Zheng and wait for his court's approval, Ku Rakin said with a cold smile. Screw that bullshit memorial. I've never written a memorial to anyone in my life. Ing Zheng is just a guy who's struggling at death's door, and he wants to be my emperor? Dream on. Song Yifei scolded loudly. Her voice was so loud that all the refugees nearby could hear her clearly. Their gazes toward Song Yifei instantly trembled. At the moment when Ing Zheng's authority was at its peak, there was actually someone who dared to scold Ing Zheng in public. This was the first time the refugees had heard of such a thing. Although they really wanted to applaud Song Yifei in their hearts, the refugees could not help but take a step back, instinctively wanting to avoid these two crazy women. Ku Rakin, do you know where Ing Zheng took the sword ladies? Song Yifei grabbed Ku Rakin's arm and asked. How would I know that? You should ask Ing Zheng. Although Ku Rakin said he did not know, his eyes were flickering. However, such a lie was useless in front of Lu Shihua, who had been ruling over mankind for 16 years. Lu Shihua said coldly, You're lying. You know where the sword ladies are, don't you? I don't know, stop torturing me. I really don't know anything. Ku Rakin felt that he was unlucky to have met two crazy women. Bring us there. We'll clear out all the sword ladies there. Let's see if he still has the guts to ask me to write a memorial. Song Yifei grabbed Ku Rakin's arm and said loudly, You're crazy, let go of me. I don't want to die with you. Ku Rakin was shocked. He did not dare to continue talking to the two. He pushed Song Yifei's hand away and prepared to leave the place. I say, Ku Rakin, when did you become such a coward? Where is the fearless Ku Rakin who dared to talk back to Gohan on Chongyang Mountain? How did you become such a coward? Seeing how terrified Ku Rakin was, Song Yifei was reminded of the time when the three of them roamed Chongyang Mountain together. She could no longer hold back her emotions and scolded him. What did you say? Who are you? Why do you know all this? Zhu Luoren's body instantly stiffened. Who were these two women? Not only did they know about his father, but they also knew about him in the past. They even knew about him and Gu Han in the past. Who exactly were these women? Damn it, Ku Rakin, you've really pissed me off. Look at who I am. Song Yifei could no longer hold it in. She tore off the disguise that was stuck on her face and revealed her original appearance. Yifei, it's actually you. Zhu Ren was completely shocked. He never thought that he would be able to see Song Yifei at this time. After disappearing for 20 years, she had returned just like that. 3 months ago, when Ing Zheng retreated to Yuzhang City, he forcefully took control of the sword garret. After that, Ing Zheng secretly transferred almost 1 million human elites to the fleeting time gap. At the same time, he also transferred all the human sword ladies there. At that time, Ing Zheng used the excuse that the sword ladies were humanity's greatest treasure and should be stored in the safest place. This was to prevent them from being lost when Yuzhang City fell. With this excuse, Ing Zheng successfully convinced Long Shi Jiandi and Frost Jiandi. As Frost Jiandi's representative, I was responsible for escorting the sword ladies to the fleeting time gap. So I knew where the sword ladies were stored. Aside from less than 10 people, no one else knew where they were. In a secluded corner, Ku Rock-in explained to Song Yifei. Then what's the deal with this broken sword garret? Even if Ing Zheng emptied the sword garret, he didn't have to destroy it. Lu Shihua couldn't hold back her anger as she spoke. This piqued Ku Rock-in's curiosity. He pointed at Lu Shihua and asked Song Yifei, "Who is she? Why is she so angry? It's as if the sword garret belongs to her." Lu Shihua didn't remove her disguise like Song Yifei did. Lu Shihua and Song Yifei were different. Song Yifei had already disappeared from the human world for 20 years. Even if she revealed her face now, no one would be able to recognize her. But once Lu Shihua's face was revealed, there was no one in the world who wouldn't recognize her. So Lu Shihua continued to maintain her disguise. "The sword garret belongs to everyone in Yuzhang," Lu Shihua replied angrily. Song Yifei quickly interrupted, "She's a friend of mine. Recently we both had the same boyfriend, so we've become friends." "What the hell, same boyfriend?" Ku Rock-in was shocked. He didn't have time to think too deeply before Lu Shihua continued to ask about the sword garret. The sword garret used to be fine, but 3 days ago, when Ing Zheng was building his palace, he said that the palace lacked some old beams. The wood from Yuzhang City's sword garret was the only wood in Yuzhang City that met Ing Zheng's requirements, so Ing Zheng tore it down and used it to build his palace. As soon as Ku Rock-in finished speaking, he punched a nearby wall. The wall immediately collapsed, scaring Ku Rock-in so much that he started sweating profusely. Chapter 1503. Both of you are already immortal sword bearers. Ku Rock-in exclaimed as he looked at Song Yifei in shock after coming out from the Gate of the Void. He had never imagined that Song Yifei was already an immortal sword-level sword wielder. After so many years, he was only a spiritual sword-level sword wielder. Zhu Luren could not help but feel a little envious of the gap. Back then, his starting line was far higher than Song Yifei's, but now, the gap between him and Song Yifei was so wide. This made Zhu Luren feel a little uncomfortable. Who asked me to have a good master? Moreover, this has nothing to do with hard work. The most important thing is to find a suitable swordmistress. Ku Rock-in, your sword element should have already exceeded 1 million quarks. Don't be anxious. When you find a suitable swordmistress, you can also become an immortal sword bearer. Song Yifei comforted Ku Rock-in, and Ku Rock-in could only nod helplessly. At the same time, he looked curiously at the other woman beside Song Yifei. This woman had also opened the Gate of the Void just now. It seemed that she was also an immortal sword bearer. However, in Ku Rock-in's memory, he had never seen an immortal sword bearer who looked like this woman. He did not know where she came from. Could it be that she was also Ming Yuan Jiandi's disciple? Although he had such doubts in his heart, time did not allow Ku Rock-in to continue thinking. At this time, the three of them had already appeared outside the fleeting time gap. Outside the fleeting time gap, it looked like an ordinary mountain with a small lake next to it. The scenery was extremely beautiful. Other than that, there did not seem to be anything unusual. However, everyone knew that there was a cave on this mountain. This cave was the entrance to the fleeting time crevice. As long as they passed through this cave, they would be able to enter the fleeting time crevice. 1,000 years ago, humans used this cave to hide in the fleeting time rift. The Kanzu fleeting time calendar led the swordbearers to guard the entrance of the cave. They fought wave after wave of Yuan Ko until the Yuan Ko suffered heavy casualties. However, they were unable to enter the fleeting time rift, so they had no choice but to give up. It was said that in the past, there were only mountains here and no lake. However, because the attack was too fierce, A huge depression was formed in the ground, and the underground water seeped out, forming a small sparkling lake. Are we going to fight our way in? I heard that Ing Zheng has arranged for 5 immortal sword-wielders to guard the entrance of the fleeting time crevice. I'm afraid we won't be able to barge in. The 3 of them arrived at the entrance of the cave. Looking at the dozen or so sword-wielders guarding the entrance, Ku Rakin said with some difficulty. To enter the fleeting time rift, the only way was through the entrance of the cave. There was no way to dig another cave. Although the entrance of the fleeting time rift was a cave, it was not in the belly of the mountain. It was just that the entrance coincided with the cave. If one were to dig a hole in the cave from another place, they would only be able to enter the interior of the mountain. There was no way to enter the fleeting time rift. This was also the reason why Yuanko was unable to break into the fleeting time gap. Otherwise, with the number of Yuanko at that time, not to mention digging a cave, even digging an entire mountain would be a piece of cake for them. Therefore, other than entering from the front, the 3 of them had no other way. This is indeed troublesome. Lu Shihua frowned as she looked at the sword-bearers guarding the entrance of the cave. She was not afraid of these immortal sword-wielders. With Lu Shihua's ability, as long as she could join forces with Song Yifei, even 5 immortal sword-wielders would not be able to stop her. However, this would definitely arouse Ing Zheng's suspicions. If Ing Zheng sent his subordinates to secretly move the sword ladies away, then Lu Shihua would have to waste a lot of time. Follow me, Lu Shihua said to the rest after a moment of hesitation. Song Yifei naturally followed Lu Shihua without hesitation. However, Ku Rakin felt that something was amiss. This fleeting time rift clearly only had one path, which was the cave. Lu Shihua wanted him to follow, but where could they go? Although he had this suspicion, Ku Rakin could only follow behind Lu Shihua. After walking around in a circle, they came to the back of the mountain, to an empty, flat grassy field. It's me. Open the door. Just as Zhu Luren stood still, he heard the woman speak in a somewhat familiar voice. This voice was completely different from the voice Zhu Luren had heard from the woman just now. It was a completely different voice. It seemed that this woman who had been hiding had also hidden her voice. Zhu Luren didn't know who she was and why she was trying so hard to hide herself. However, Ku Rakin felt that this voice was familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before. However, he could not remember whose voice it was. Ku Rakin did not think for too long, because in the next second, the entire field suddenly shook. At the same time, Ku Rakin noticed that a 1-meter-wide, ordinary field suddenly opened up, revealing a pitch-black cave. There was actually such a mechanism near the fleeting time mountain range. Jules Vren was shocked by this scene. It should be noted that this mountain range was an important place for humans, and it was protected as the last refuge base for humans. Usually, there would be hundreds of sword-wielding people constantly patrolling around the entire mountain range to ensure that Yuan Ko would not do anything near the mountain range. In such a heavily guarded place, there was actually an entrance to a mechanism, and it was at the core of the mountain range. Who was this woman? How did she know that there was a mechanism here? Was she really a human? Ku Rakin was shocked by his own guess, and he had the urge to escape from this place. Lu Shihua, on the other hand, did not notice Jules Vren's expression as he directly jumped into the pitch-black hole. Song Yifei also jumped in, leaving Ku Rakin alone outside the cave. It was obviously the last time for Ku Rakin to leave, but after Ku Rakin stomped his feet, he chose to believe Song Yifei, and jumped in together with Song Yifei. Who built this place? After falling in the air for about 3 minutes, Ku Rakin finally landed on the ground. There was a small space in front of Ku Rakin, or rather, the space was very small. It was only about 20 square meters, and it felt a little crowded with 3 people. However, when Ku Rakin saw the small room, he was shocked because of the walls of the room. There's no mistake, the walls are all built with imperial alloy. Ku Rakin gently touched the walls, and his eyes became more and more shocked. The walls were all built with imperial alloy. Imperial alloy was a precious alloy that could only be made by emperor sword wielders, and it was usually only used in important places. But here, it was all used to build the walls of the room. If he did not see it with his own eyes, Ku Rock-in would definitely not believe his eyes. This is imperial alloy. It's my first time seeing it. After hearing what Ku Rock-in said, Song Yifei curiously touched the wall, and even rubbed his face against it. Then, he smiled at the other woman and said, "Didn't I hear that imperial alloy is very precious? Isn't it a waste to use it here?" "There's nothing to waste," Lu Shihua said to Song Yifei as he operated on an instrument on the wall. "This place is very important, and it's worth using imperial alloy to protect it. Otherwise, if Yuan Ko enters here, our last refuge will be gone. Moreover, this is only 10 years' worth of production from an Emperor's sword-level sword wielder. If you really think it's a waste, you can create 10 years' worth of production yourself and add it to the Sword Committee's warehouse," Lu Shihua said calmly. "Come on, you go. I don't want to waste my precious time on making some Emperor alloy." Song Yifei stuck out his tongue, and Jules Vren was completely speechless. Could it be that Song Yifei was already close to ascending to the throne and becoming an emperor? This discovery made Ku Rock-in's little heart unable to take it anymore. "Alright. It's open," Lu Shihua suddenly said. At that moment, one of the walls suddenly disappeared, and in its place was a shining blue wall. "Come in quickly, this door can only last for 5 seconds. If you're late, you'll be in," Lu Shihua urged the other two. Song Yifei carried Kong Na with one hand and pulled Ku Rock-in with the other. When Ku Rock-in saw the world in front of him clearly, he was shocked to find himself in a lush green field. This is the fleeting time gap. Ku Rock-in looked at the world in front of him, feeling the silt under his feet and the city in front of him. "That's right, this is the fleeting time gap. I actually entered the fleeting time gap." "That's not right. Isn't there only one entrance to the fleeting time gap? Why is there an entrance to the fleeting time gap here? Why didn't I know about this, could it be?" Ku Rock-in raised his head and looked at Lu Shihua in disbelief. "This is a secret entrance. It was built by Kanzu back in the day. Under certain circumstances, this entrance can be used to guide other people into the fleeting time gap. At the same time, it is also the only escape route if the fleeting time gap is breached. You can never put all your eggs in one basket," Lu Shihua said calmly, and at the same time, he stared at Ku Rock-in and said, "Before this, only 3 people in the entire human world knew about this secret. If you dare to reveal the secret of this entrance, I'll kill you myself." Hearing Lu Shihua's cold voice, Ku Rock-in could not help but shiver. Chapter 1504. Who is this woman? How does she know about the secret entrance that only 3 people in the world know about? Who is she? Ku Rock-in could not figure out the mysterious woman's identity. As for the woman's threat, Ku Rock-in did not take it to heart. This was because Jules Vren was certain that he could completely keep this secret and would never let a second person know about it. Of course, Lu Shihua would not tell Ku Rock-in that the secret entrance was only known to the chairman of the Sword Committee. Back then, Kanzu had brought humans to live in the fleeting time crevice. They were worried that the fleeting time crevice would be breached by the enemy. If that happened, the humans would be trapped. Hence, they created an exit in a secret place and used imperial alloy to protect it. That way, even if Yuan Ko discovered the exit, it would be difficult for him to break through the protection of imperial alloy. This would give Kanzu a chance to seal the exit. Fortunately, Yuan Ko did not break through the fleeting time crevice. Hence, there was no opportunity for the exit to be used. Hence, it was kept as a top secret. Only the chairman of the Sword Committee, the master of the fleeting time family, and the Emperor sword wielder knew about it. Unexpectedly, when this exit was used again, its function had been reversed. It had become an entrance for Lu Shihua to sneak into the fleeting time gap. If the sword ancestor knew about this in the underworld, what would he think? As for Ying Zheng, because Ying Zheng did not use the normal method of handing over the exit, and Liuyan Ling was clearly not interested in telling Ying Zheng about the exit, Ying Zheng was kept in the dark. He did not even know about the existence of the exit. Otherwise, Ying Zheng might have stationed people near the exit. That would be troublesome. In the farmland of the fleeting time crevice, there were fully automated construction machines farming the land. As there was no need to worry about Yuan Ko invading, all the land was fully automated and the machines were in charge of farming. There was no need to worry that the machines would be destroyed by Yuan Ko, so there was no need for anyone to look after the machines. Most of the land in the fleeting time crevice was farmland. Only Fleeting Time City in the middle of the crevice could provide a living for humans. Originally, Flowing Year City was the private property of the Lunyan clan. Only the Lunyan clan's people could enter the city, no one else could. However, since Frost Jiendi had taken the initiative to offer the city as a last refuge for humanity, Flowing Time City was now under Ying Zheng's control. It was now being managed by Ying Zheng's trusted aides. Flowing Time City was not a large city, and was designed to have a population of 200,000. With the influx of 1 million people, the entire Flowing Time City became bloated. Just like Yuzhang City, people could be seen setting up tents on the street. However, compared to the refugees in Yuzhang City, the residents of Flowing Time City were calm despite not having a roof over their heads. Some even had happy smiles on their faces. They were all lucky people. Perhaps it was because of their own abilities, or perhaps it was because they had a direct relative of the swordsman, that they were given a place to stay in Flowing Time City. They were provided with sufficient food every day, and did not have to worry about survival. Naturally, they did not have to worry too much. Comrade Ku Rakin, where do you think Ying Zheng hid the natural sword maidens? Take us there. Lu Shihua said to Ku Rakin. Ku Rakin nodded his head and led Song Yifei and Lu Shihua through the city. After making a few turns, they finally arrived in front of an ordinary-looking 3-story building. I was the one who moved the natural sword maidens here. I don't know if they are still here after that. Ku Rakin laughed bitterly. I'll go take a look. Song Yifei's lips curled into a smile as he entered the void. When he came out a few seconds later, his face was filled with regret as he said, "It's empty. There's nothing inside." Ying Zheng is indeed very careful. All the innate sword ladies have been moved away. That's troublesome. Flowing Time City is not big, but it's not small either. There's even a labyrinth-like shelter under the city. Where did Ying Zheng hide the natural sword maidens? Lu Shihua frowned and thought for a moment. He then asked Ku Rakin, "Do you know which 5 sword immortals are guarding this place?" "They are." Ku Rakin gave the names of the 5 sword immortals. When Lu Shihua heard sword immortal Hudi's name, his eyes lit up. He had an idea. "Yifei, take Ku Rakin and leave this place." Lu Shihua gave Song Yifei a look. "All right. I'll wake that guy up and tell him to stop sleeping. Ying Zheng is going to be the emperor soon." Song Yifei chuckled and led Julvren, who had no idea what had happened from the beginning to the end, out of the space crack, while Lu Shihua walked straight into the most magnificent building in the space crack. This building was originally the residence of the Flowing Time family in the city. However, it had now become the residence of the 5 immortal sword immortals. "Where does Sword Immortal Hudi stay?" Lu Shihua asked a staff member who was passing by. "I don't know. I don't know." The staff member was shocked and immediately said with extreme fear, "If you don't tell me, I'll kill you." After being the chairman of the Sword Committee for so long, Lu Shihua naturally would not be soft-hearted. Together with her ferocious face, she successfully scared the staff member who had intended to be Lu Hullen. The staff member could only resign himself to fate and tell Lu Shihua where Sword Immortal Hudi was. "Go to sleep first." After Lu Shihua got the answer, she knocked the staff out and threw him into a bush. This way, no one would notice that a staff member had disappeared. Meanwhile, Lu Shihua entered Sword Immortal Hu Di's room through the void. Is that Sword Immortal Mata? Sword Immortal Hu Di, who was working in the room, asked casually when he sensed the ripples in the void. Sword Immortal Mata was the one who had the closest relationship with Sword Immortal Hu Di among the 5 immortal sword rank sword bearers who were stationed here. Therefore, he naturally believed that Sword Immortal Mata was looking for him through the void. However, anger surged in Sword Immortal Hu Di's heart at the same time. Although it was very convenient to enter through the void, it was also very rude. If Sword Immortal Marta didn't give him a reasonable explanation, Hu Di wouldn't mind teaching this rude guy a lesson for entering someone else's private space directly through the void. What are you busy with? He reached out and grabbed the document on Sword Immortal Hu Di's desk. When he held it in his hand, he saw that it was an article titled, "Congratulations on His Majesty's Ascension to the Throne," or more accurately, it was a memorial to the throne. It was a memorial written by Sword Immortal Hu Di to congratulate Ying Zheng on his ascension to the throne. How dare you? Who dares to barge into my room? Sword Immortal Hu Di could clearly see that the person who had suddenly entered his room through the void was not Sword Immortal Mata, but an immortal swordswoman whom he had never seen before. He was instantly enraged. At the same time, a cold-looking sword lady also tore through the void and entered the room. At the same time, she stood in front of Sword Immortal Hu Di. This sword lady was clearly Sword Immortal Hu Di's immortal sword lady. No matter who you are, since you're here, don't even think of leaving. Just wait for His Majesty the Founding Emperor's punishment. With his sword lady standing in front of him, Sword Immortal Hu Di immediately felt a lot more at ease. Moreover, there were 3 other immortal swordsmen nearby. It would only take a few seconds at most for the other immortal swordsman to rush over. There was no need for him to be afraid of this mysterious fellow who had suddenly appeared. Hu Di, are you so willing to be Ying Zheng's dog? The other party sneered. However, Hu Di's expression changed drastically in an instant. This woman's voice was so familiar that Hu Di would never forget it for the rest of his life. Chairman Shihua. This is Chairman Shihua's voice. Who on earth are you? Sword Immortal Hu Di cried out involuntarily. Lu Shihua no longer concealed her identity. With a jolt of sword chi, the disguise plastered on her face was shaken off. Her beautiful face was directly facing Hu Di as she said, "Look carefully, who on earth am I?" Chairman Shihua. It really is Chairman Shihua. Sword Immortal Hu Di's mouth was so wide open that he could swallow a duck's egg. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that Lu Shihua, who had already sacrificed herself for 4 whole years, would suddenly appear before him at this moment. No, you're a liar. You're not Chairman Shihua. Chairman Shihua has already sacrificed herself. You're trying to deceive me. After the initial shock, Hu Di began to spout nonsense. If he wanted to convince such an experienced and knowledgeable immortal swordsman that he was Lu Shihua, it was clear that just his appearance and voice were not enough. There was no shortage of plastic surgery methods in this world. Go! Sword Immortal Hu Di's reaction was also within Lu Shihua's expectations. She casually flung out 3 beams of sword chi towards Sword Immortal Hu Di, who instinctively raised a close-fitting shield to defend himself. After a series of crashing sounds, the room returned to silence. Sword Immortal Hu Di stared blankly at Lu Shihua in front of him, his expression completely blank. How is it? You should be able to confirm my identity now, right? If you haven't forgotten what we said when we first met. Lu Shihua said with a smile. Back when Lu Shihua and Sword Immortal Hu Di first met, Sword Immortal Hu Di was still just a sword spirit. At that time, the fearless Sword Immortal Hu Di actually dared to challenge Lu Shihua. In the end, He was sent flying by Lu Shihua's 3 sword strikes. Furthermore, the 3 sword strikes landed in the exact same spot as where Lu Shihua's sword qi had landed. This was something that only Lu Shihua and Sword Immortal Hu Di knew. It was impossible for a third person to know. Boss. It really is you. Boss, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you didn't die. Sword Immortal Hu Di's emotions began to change rapidly. Tears also began to flow uncontrollably from his eyes. He immediately hugged Lu Shihua's thigh and wailed loudly. All right, boss, didn't I come back safe and sound? Lu Shihua smiled bitterly. Who would have thought that the usually stern Sword Immortal Hu Di would be so good at crying? His tears were almost as much as when he and his master had reunited. Chapter 1505. Sword Immortal Hu Di was Lu Shihua's trusted aide. Around 12 years ago, Sword Immortal Hu Di had just become a spirit sword wielder. Who knows where he heard that Lu Shihua had relied on Gahan to become the chairman of the Sword Council. The young and frivolous Hu Di actually challenged Lu Shihua to a duel. Of course, Sword Immortal Hu Di requested that Lu Shihua not use immortal sword wielder sword women. At the same time, Sword Immortal Hu Di was limited to 1 million quarks. Originally, Lu Shihua had no interest in such a boring challenge. However, Lu Shihua was in a bad mood and drank quite a bit. In the end, he accepted Sword Immortal Hu Di's challenge. With just 3 strikes, he defeated Sword Immortal Hu Di. From then on, Sword Immortal Hu Di was completely convinced of Lu Shihua's strength. He became one of Lu Shihua's most capable right-hand men. Later on, he even became an immortal sword wielder. So when Lu Shihua heard that Sword Immortal Hu Di was still here, he immediately felt relieved. He took the initiative to find Sword Immortal Hu Di, hoping that he could help him find the 12-winged angel sword. Next, Lu Shihua simply told Sword Immortal Hu Di about how he was framed by Ying Zheng, how he was saved by Ming Yuan Jiandi, and how he was resurrected. However, Lu Shihua hid Gahan's existence. He only said that he had recuperated in Ming Yuan City for 5 years and only returned after his body had fully recovered. Lu Yin, that bastard. He lied to me and said that he received your last words. He wanted me to do my best to help him. Otherwise, why would I work for him? Sword Immortal Hu Di immediately stomped his feet in anger after hearing Lu Shihua's explanation. This also explained why Sword Immortal Hu Di would work for Ying Zheng. Boss, don't worry. I know where the 12-winged angel sword is. Sure enough, after hearing Lu Shihua's goal, Sword Immortal Hu Di immediately patted his chest. Good. Lu Shihua's face revealed an excited expression. Under Sword Immortal Hu Di's guidance, the two smoothly traversed through flowing Time City. Finally, they arrived at a small, hidden door. This place was originally used by the Lun Yen family to store their valuables. Later on, Frost and Jiandi took all of their valuables away. Ying Zheng decided to use this place to store the natural sword maidens he obtained from the 8 base cities. At the same time, he used his own password to open the door to the warehouse. Lu Shihua followed Sword Immortal Hu Di into the warehouse. Why is it so dark here? Hoodie, turn on the light. Lu Shihua, who had just entered the warehouse, noticed that it was unusually dark. It was so dark that he could not even see his own fingers. My apologies, Lord Lu Shihua. Sword Immortal Hu Di's voice suddenly sounded like he was gnashing his teeth. Lu Shihua immediately knew that something was amiss. She immediately opened a void door and prepared to leave, but she was ultimately too late. Lu Shihua felt the world spin around her as though her entire body was being disintegrated. When she saw light again, she realized that she was already in a mountain valley. This is a brand new dimensional rift. Lu Shihua sensed the space around her, and was shocked to discover that she had actually arrived in a brand new dimensional rift. This dimensional rift was completely different from the flowing time rift, and it was a dimensional rift that did not exist in human records. Hu Di, you actually used a quantum teleportation array to ambush me. When Lu Shihua discovered that this was a brand new dimensional rift, she immediately shouted angrily at her surroundings. Lord Shihua is indeed impressive. You reacted immediately. Sword Immortal Hu Di slowly flew in front of Lu Shihua and looked at her with a complicated expression. Hu Di, you actually betrayed me. You ungrateful scum. Lu Shihua said through gritted teeth when she saw Sword Immortal Hu Di appear. This was because, following the appearance of Sword Immortal Hu Di, 4 other immortal sword wielders appeared in 4 other directions. These 5 people surrounded Lu Shihua tightly, not giving him any chance of escape. Lu Shihua did not attempt to escape through the void door because she knew that this was a dimensional rift. Although she could use the void door in a dimensional rift, the void door's range was limited to the dimensional rift. In other words, Lu Shihua could only use the void door to move around in this narrow dimensional rift. There was no way for her to escape through the dimensional rift. Master Shihua, you're wrong. I didn't lie to you. This is where the natural sword lady is kept. The natural sword lady is right there. Hu Di pointed at a thatched hut on a hill not far away and said. Without another word, Lu Shihua appeared next to the thatched hut in the next second. In the end, Lu Shihua's expression changed. She could already sense that the thatched hut was not a real thatched hut, but a dimensional pocket that had changed its appearance. This meant that unless the owner of the dimensional pocket opened it, the natural sword lady in the pocket would not be released. She could not defeat these immortal sword wielders by obtaining the 12-winged angel sword and ascending to the throne. Hu Di, you are getting bolder and bolder. You actually dared to attack me. Don't forget, I am still the chairman of the Sword Committee. My term is not over yet. That Ying Zheng is just a bastard who did not go through the proper legal procedures, Lu Shihua said fiercely as she looked at Hu Di. Hu Di sighed and said, Master Shihua, I respect you for being my former leader. We don't want to do anything to you. Hand over your sword lady, and I will hand you over to His Majesty. Before that, I can guarantee your safety. Haha, I should have known. Since Ying Zheng arranged for you to be in the fleeting time gap, it means that Ying Zheng has absolute trust in you. How could you still be my right-hand man? I was too stupid. I could not see through such a simple human heart. Lu Shihua sighed and said with some grief and indignation, People's hearts will eventually change. Lord Shihua, you are wrong again. My heart has never changed from beginning to end. What Lu Shihua did not expect was that Hu Di's next words would give Lu Shihua a huge blow. Hu Di continued to say, Actually, Lord Shihua, I, Hu Di, have never been your right-hand man. There is a part of my resume that you may not have noticed. Before I became a sword bearer, I was a player of the Yaoguang sword faction in Sword Lady Online. I did not have the opportunity to become a sword bearer, but His Majesty saw my potential and spent a lot of money to buy many Sword Lady tokens in the game. In the end, I was able to coordinate with 2,000 different ancient sword ladies and finally found an ancient sword lady that belonged to me and became an ancient sword lady. Hu Di said gratefully, From the moment I became the sword bearer, I swore to dedicate my life to His Majesty. My life is His Majesty's sword. Wherever His Majesty wants me to go, I'll go. Even if I die, I'm willing to do so. Fortunately, my path was very smooth, and I actually became a spirit sword level sword wielder. Thus, His Majesty the First Emperor placed me by your side. So, my dear Lord Shihua, I have never been one of your people, nor am I your right-hand man. I am just a chess piece used to monitor you. Actually, you can't blame me for this. Didn't even the person closest to you betray you? Sword Immortal Hu Di's words were like a handful of salt sprinkled on Lu Shihua's wounds. Lu Shihua once had 2 trusted subordinates who were known as his left and right hand. One was Sword Immortal Hu Di, and the other was naturally Lu Shihua's younger brother, Lu Yin. But in the end, both of them had betrayed Lu Shihua, and almost everything about Lu Shihua was controlled by Ying Jing. It was no wonder that Lu Shihua was killed by Ying Jing so easily in the end. The enemy knew every move you made, so how could you not fail? I see. After a moment of silence, Lu Shihua glanced at the other 4 sword-bearers who were also silent. What about the 4 of you? Are you going to attack me as well? Lord Shihua, you don't have to say any more. The 4 of them are the same as me. We were all nurtured by His Majesty from ancient sword-bearers to where we are today. The 5 of us will never betray His Majesty, Sword Immortal Hu Di said. Fine. If that's the case, then let's do it. Lu Shihua sighed and held the 10-winged angel sword in his hand. He pointed the tip of the sword at the 5 sword-bearers. Do it. The 5 sword-bearers did not hesitate and immediately charged at Lu Shihua. Both sides were instantly engaged in a chaotic battle. There was not much to say about the battle. Lu Shihua, who had received Gohan's teachings, was the strongest among the 5 sword-bearers. But the problem was that Lu Shihua's body was almost completely reconstructed. Most of the meridians in his body were still blocked, so Lu Shihua could not use his full strength. More importantly, these 5 immortal sword-rank sword-bearers were all very strong. Hu Di did not need to be mentioned. He had received guidance from Ying Jing, and Lu Shihua, who had trained him as his right-hand man, had also taught Hu Di many things. Among them, there was no lack of Lu Shihua's unique sword technique. The direct result was that Hu Di understood Lu Shihua very well, and could almost completely predict Lu Shihua's tactic. Together with the attacks of the other 4 immortal sword-rank sword maidens, this absolute difference in numbers and ability directly forced Lu Shihua into an extremely difficult situation. Lu Shihua could only barely defend against the attacks of the 5 immortal sword-rank sword maidens. The energy of the personal protective shield around his body was constantly being depleted, and very soon, it had been weakened by 30%. Lu Shihua looked like he was going to lose for sure. Sword Immortal Hu Di sighed and said, "Don't waste time. His Majesty the First Emperor's Ascension ceremony has already begun. We have to hurry over to congratulate His Majesty the First Emperor. This is our best congratulatory gift. Everyone, use your trump cards and quickly capture her alive. No, just kill her. Capturing her alive is too difficult." Chapter 1506. This damned body still doesn't listen to me. It's all Master's fault. When he helped me reconstruct my body, he didn't even know to unblock my meridians. Why did he have to create the original meridians? Lu Shihua grumbled about his new body as he defended against the attacks of the 5 immortal sword maidens. Although this body was created perfectly by Gohan, the meridians that Lu Shihua had spent more than 10 years to clear were now closed again. Whether all the meridians were opened or not was an extremely important matter to Lu Shihua, and to the green freezing meridians. After all, be it the 9 swords of mysterious heaven or the chaos sword technique, they both relied on the meridians in one's body. In a situation where the meridians were not opened, Lu Shihua could not even use half of his strength. If this body could be restored to its peak, Lu Shihua wouldn't have been beaten to such a sorry state by these 5 guys. Damn it, they're going to use their ultimate move. Lu Shihua suddenly felt that the attacks he was facing had slowed down. The pressure of the attacks was greatly reduced, and the situation seemed to have turned for the better. But Lu Shihua was screaming in his heart. Of course, Lu Shihua did not think that these loyal forces of Ying Jing would let him go because of their conscience. They had taken the initiative to slow down their attacks. There could only be one reason: they were preparing an even more powerful attack, which was the legendary ultimate move. Unfortunately, by the time Lu Shihua reacted, it was already a little too late. The 5 immortal sword maidens had already finished preparing their ultimate move. Of these 5 ultimate moves, 3 were pure damage type ultimate moves that could deal 20 to 30 times the normal damage. The other was a control skill that could freeze time. There was also a negative effect that could increase the damage taken by the opponent by more than 10 times. These 5 ultimate moves all landed on Lu Shihua's body. One could only imagine the terrifying damage that Lu Shihua had to endure in an instant. Faced with these 5 ultimate moves, Lu Shihua did not even have the right to dodge. He could only desperately activate his sword essence, hoping that he could use his personal shield to take on all the damage. But at the same time, Lu Shihua also knew that even if his personal shield could block all the skills, he would be an arrow at the end of its flight. It was almost impossible for him to resist the next attack from these 5 swordsmen. Am I really going to die here? Lu Shihua smiled bitterly as he looked at the incoming skill and muttered to himself, "Forget it. I've already died once, so dying again isn't a big deal. As long as I still have my head, Master should be able to resurrect me again." Is this how you use your master? As soon as Lu Shihua finished muttering to himself and saw that the attacks were about to hit him, a languid voice with a hint of dissatisfaction rang out. At the same time, Lu Shihua saw a bright flash of sword light. The 5 powerful attacks were shattered by the sword light in an instant and disappeared. Master! Lu Shihua looked at the figure that suddenly appeared in front of him in surprise. Gohan had finally arrived in time. Who is it? Where did our ultimate move go? Compared to the delighted Lu Shihua, Sword Immortal Hu Di and the others were naturally horrified. Their 5 powerful moves, which seemed to look down on everything in the world, disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Until now, they still had not figured out how their ultimate move had disappeared. They only felt a dazzling flash of light and everything was gone. Is this how you treat your chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters? You're rebelling, do you understand? You'll be beheaded if you rebel. The man who appeared in front of the 5 swordsmen said. Among the 5 sword-bearers, 4 of them did not recognize who this man was at first glance. After all, it had been 20 years since Gohan's name had spread far and wide. A famous figure 20 years ago had slowly been forgotten by most people 20 years later. Only Sword Immortal Hu Di reacted immediately. He looked at the man and trembled all over. He forced out a few words from his throat. Sword Immortal Hong Jun, your Sword Immortal Hong Jun. That's right, there's still one who knows me. Gohan nodded with a gratified expression. Of course I know you. A bitter expression appeared on Sword Immortal Hu Di's face as he said, when I was with Master Shihua hung your photo in his office. There were more than 10 meticulously framed photos hanging there. I look at them almost 100 times every day. I'll never forget them for the rest of my life. How could I not recognize you, Sword Immortal Hong Jun? Is that so? You actually hung Master's photos all over your office. Should I collect some copyright fees from you? Hearing Sword Immortal Hu Di's words, Gohan turned around with a smile and asked Lu Shihua behind him. What copyright fees? Everything belongs to me, Master. Master, if you like it, you can have it, Lu Shihua said with his head lowered. His words could be said to be very meaningful. All right, I don't have time to argue with you. Seeing that you're all humans, hand over your sword, ladies, hand over your dimensional pockets, and stick this talisman on your body. I'll spare your lives. After you've been modified, I'll set you free. After all, every immortal sword-tier sword wielder is very important now. I don't want to go on a killing spree and cause internal strife among humans. Gohan looked at the 5 of them and said calmly. His tone was much more domineering than Sword Immortal Hu Di's earlier persuasion. Sword Immortal Hu Di seemed to want to say something, but the other 4 immortal sword-tier sword wielder didn't say anything. They controlled their sword ladies to attack Gohan at the same time. These guys had seen some information about Gohan on the internet and knew that the internet praised Gohan as the strongest sword wielder after Kenzu. He was even comparable to Zhetian Jiandi. But these immortal tier sword wielder, who hadn't experienced Gohan's power at his peak, would never believe these discussions on the internet. They only felt that their predecessors were exaggerating. If the 5 of them could beat up Lu Shihua, who was known as the strongest immortal tier sword wielder, they could also beat up this man. Among the 5 of them, only Sword Immortal Hu Di had a better understanding of Gohan. After all, he had been with Lu Shihua for a very long time. Through Lu Shihua's usual words and actions, Sword Immortal Hu Di clearly knew just how terrifyingly powerful his master, whom Lu Shihua revered so much, was. Originally, Hu Di wanted to play around a little longer. Fortunately, he had secretly informed Ing Zheng and let Ing Zheng deal with Gohan. Unfortunately, his 4 companions were a little too fast. As a result, Sword Immortal Hu Di could only follow the 4 of them. At the same time, he prayed in his heart that this Gohan's power would definitely be exaggerated. All the discussions on the internet were just nonsense. Gohan was only slightly stronger than the average immortal tier sword wielder. Although Sword Immortal Hu Di kept praying in his heart, reality was very cruel. The attacks of the 5 of them didn't even need to be described in 100 words. With just 5 strikes, the Sword Lady's personal shields were broken by Gohan. At the same time, all their durability was cut off. Finally, they fell to the ground, becoming long swords riddled with scars. However, Gohan had controlled the size very well. The damage was just enough to force the Sword Ladies back into their sword forms, but not enough to break them. After all, these immortal Sword Ladies were the most important capital of humanity's future. Moreover, the Sword Ladies were innocent. No matter what, Gohan wouldn't allow them to break. Just 1 strike, and I was defeated. Sword Immortal Hu Di stared at Gohan in a daze. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that he, an immortal tier sword wielder, would be able to force his superior to the brink of death. But against Gohan, against Sword Immortal Hong Jun, he was defeated in just 1 strike. We haven't lost yet. Sword Immortal Hu Di was dejected. The other 4 immortal tier sword wielder didn't seem to be willing to admit defeat. They actually began to activate their immortal sword ladies again. These immortal sword ladies, whose bodies were riddled with cracks, also showed signs of being released again. How dare you beasts! Seeing this scene, Gohan's eyebrows were about to burst into flames. These sword wielder were actually planning to forcefully release these immortal sword ladies, whose durability had been depleted, and force them to continue fighting. No, the sword maidens whose durability was about to be depleted had no combat power left. It seemed like these fellows were planning on using the immortal grade sword maidens to their last bit of value. They had directly detonated the 4 immortal grade sword maidens, using the massive damage from their self-detonation to kill themselves. But once they self-destructed, these sword ladies would definitely be broken into countless pieces. When that happened, they probably wouldn't even have the chance to revive. These guys no longer cared about the lives of their own sword ladies. How could Gohan, who viewed sword ladies as humanity's most important partner, allow such a thing to happen? Tisk! Gohan snorted coldly. At the same time, he drew the Qing Pin sword, the past water sword, the heavenly sword, and the Doyu sword from his waist. At the same time, 4 void gates opened. These 4 sword ladies entered the 4 void gate. In 1,000th of a second, the exit of the void gate opened. Piercingly cold sword light flashed in the void, and 4 heads flew high into the air. Fresh blood sprayed all over the ground. The immortal sword ladies, who were about to self-destruct, finally calmed down. This was because their sword bearers were dead. Shameless heads fell to the ground. I originally wanted to spare your lives and let you continue to serve humanity. Now it seems like it was unnecessary. Gohan sheathed the 4 sword ladies, and the dimensional rift once again calmed down. Chapter 1507. Sword Immortal Hong Jun. Your sword Immortal Hong Jun. You're not dead. You're still alive. Sword Immortal Hudi muttered to himself as he trembled in fear when he saw 4 immortal level sword-bearers die under Gohan's sword in an instant. That's right. I've returned alive. I'm here to settle the score with your master, Gohan said with a smile. Why didn't you kill me? Sword Immortal Hudi saw that his 4 companions' necks had been separated from their bodies, but his head was still attached to his neck. Although he was terrified, he couldn't help but ask Gohan this question. It's simple. To humans nowadays, every immortal level sword-bearer is extremely important. Even if you're Ingzheng's subordinate, as long as you're willing to turn over a new leaf, I can spare your life, Gohan said calmly. Then why did you kill the 4 of them? One of them was even more powerful than me. They should be more useful than me. Sword Immortal Hudi asked again. These 4 pieces of trash actually wanted the Sword Maiden to self-destruct. They've already lost all meaning in living. They had to die. You're different. I can tell that you still maintain the attitude of a sword-bearer towards your Sword Maiden. That's why I spared your life, Gohan said. I think you want to keep me alive so I can help you open that dimensional pocket. Sword Immortal Hudi suddenly revealed a cold smile. He looked at the straw hut nearby and said loudly, Stop your wishful thinking. This dimensional pocket belongs to His Majesty Ingzheng. Only His Majesty Ingzheng can open this dimensional pocket. It's useless for you to keep me alive. Just kill me. Is that so? A playful smile appeared on Gohan's face. Lu Shihua's expression dimmed. After a moment of hesitation, he said, Master, why don't we forget it? Since this dimensional pocket belongs to Ingzheng, it can only be opened by wearing it down with time and the Emperor's blood. We don't have any more time now. It is more important for me to stop Ingzheng's ascension ceremony. I don't mind waiting for a little while longer. It's best if you hide in some hidden dimensional rift and never come out. I'm doing this for your own good. If you go after His Majesty Ingzheng, only death awaits you. Furthermore, His Majesty Ingzheng won't let you off either. If he knows that 4 of his subordinates have died by your hands, he'll definitely hunt you down endlessly. Hurry up and hide. That way you'll be able to preserve your lives. Consider this a piece of advice from me before I die. Sword Immortal Hudi suddenly struggled as he spoke. It could be seen that Sword Immortal Hudi's words were sincere advice. In Sword Immortal Hudi's heart, Gohan was naturally no match for Ingzheng. Ingzheng's current strength was equivalent to the strength of 24 Zhu Wus. Gohan and Lu Shihua were only immortal sword wielders. All of them were natural sword maidens. Ingzheng, this bastard, he actually hid all the natural sword maidens of the human race. This bastard deserves to be punished. Gohan said angrily. Once this natural sword maiden was controlled by someone, it could be seen that in the future, all the sword bearers would also be controlled. Ingzheng would then be able to take all the benefits shared by all of humanity into his own hand. This bastard really deserved to die. The dimensional pocket has been opened. Sword Immortal Hudi suddenly slumped to the ground. No matter how he thought about it, he could not understand how this seemingly foolproof dimensional pocket could be opened so easily by Gohan. This was a dimensional pocket that could only be forcibly opened with Emperor blood and time. How could it be like this? This consciousness fragment really has endless uses. Gohan said as he sensed his own consciousness fragment. Gohan originally also felt that it was impossible to forcibly open the dimensional pocket in a short 3 seconds. However, in the memories of the Saint Relic, there was a set of methods to control the dimensional space. According to the description of this control method, the power of the dimensional space could actually be absorbed by the consciousness fragment. Therefore, as long as one used the consciousness fragment to absorb the power of the dimensional space, any dimensional space would be defenseless in front of the consciousness fragment and could be opened. Following this method, Gu Han sent a fragment of his consciousness into the wall of the thatched hut. The result was just like what the saint's relic had described. The fragment of his consciousness began to fuse with the layer of defense outside the dimensional pocket, and then he was able to control the dimensional space contained in the dimensional pocket. Gu Han had used less than 10 fragments of his consciousness in total, and he had successfully opened the dimensional pocket left behind by Ying Zheng, which was said to be foolproof. Found it. Gu Han very quickly found the 12-winged angel sword from the pile of natural sword maidens. After all, the 12-winged angel sword was an emperor's sword maiden. It was extremely precious, so Ying Zheng had deliberately stored the 12-winged angel sword in a wooden box. This was a privilege that only emperor's sword maidens had. All the other sword maidens were piled up in Ying Zheng's dimensional pocket like ordinary trash. Even the immortal sword maidens were treated the same way. From this, one could tell how arrogant Ying Zheng was. Good disciple, are you ready to hold her? Gu Han placed the 12-winged angel sword in front of Lu Shihua. Lu Shihua looked at this sword maiden that could allow him to embark on a completely different path. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. As long as he held this sword hilt, he would stand at the peak of humanity. He could call himself Emperor. Disciple, I'm ready. Lu Shihua took a deep breath and nodded. Very good. Gu Han's expression was serious as he said, Disciple, don't let your guard down. After you hold onto this Emperor's sword, you still have to go through the 9 regions struggle for supremacy before you can truly ascend the throne. This is a battle of the heart. If you can't maintain your true self in the 9 states competition, you will be lost in the power of Emperor swords. Even if you become an Emperor sword wielder, you will still lose your true self. Gu Han's words made Lu Shihua's heart skip a beat. It was different from the synchronization of a normal sword wielder. The synchronization of Emperor sword maidens still had to go through the 9 states competition. None of the Emperor sword wielders were able to give a standard answer to the specific situation of the 9 provinces deer chase. This was because the 9 provinces deer chase was actually an illusion that the Emperor sword-level swordmistress had cast on the wielder. Only by going through the entire 9 provinces deer chase illusion and maintaining one's true self in the illusion could one truly control the Emperor sword-level swordmistress and become a true Emperor sword wielder. However, if one was shaken in the 9 states competition illusion and lost one's true self, although one could still ascend to the throne and become an emperor, one's true self would disappear. Then, even if one became an emperor sword wielder, the sword essence in one's body would be sealed. From then on, one's sword essence would no longer be able to grow. The same amount of sword essence one had when one ascended to the throne and became an emperor would be the same amount of sword essence one would have in this lifetime. One would forever lose the possibility of growth. Every emperor sword wielder was an absolute hero. They had experienced countless hardships and adventures to grow to this stage, and their willpower surpassed that of most ordinary humans. However, such heroes still had around a 50% chance of failure in the 9 states battle for supremacy. For example, the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor had failed in the 9 states battle for supremacy. As a result, after he ascended to the throne, his sword element had always remained at the level of 20 million quarks, and there had been no growth for his entire life. Chapter 1508. Yes, I understand. Lu Shihua nodded solemnly and decisively grabbed the 12-winged angel sword in Gu Han's hand. Lu Shihua's body rapidly petrified as he entered a synchronized state. At the same time, he entered the mental illusion of the 9 states vying for supremacy. As for the duration of the petrification, this period of time depended on the hardships and tempering that the sword-bearer had experienced in the 9 prefectures competition. Some people could be petrified within a minute, while others could only be petrified after a month. As for how long Lu Shihua wanted to be petrified, that would depend on his own ability. I can't wait here any longer. I'm only one step away. If I wait any longer, Zheng will run out of time. Gohan pondered. At the same time, he shot out a beam of sword chi from his hand, circling Sword Immortal Hudi's head. Sword Immortal Hudi's head followed the fate of his 4 companions and fell. Sword Immortal Hudi had originally thought that he had already received Gohan's forgiveness and that he would be able to preserve his life. Just as he was secretly rejoicing, before he could even react, his head had already left his body. I really didn't want to kill you. Gohan looked at Sword Immortal Hudi's corpse and sighed. Unfortunately, the 2 of us are about to enter a petrified state. If I let you stay here, the 2 of us will be in danger. After Sword Immortal Hudi's death, Gohan no longer had any reservations. He took out the Xianyuan sword with one hand and the Immortal Trapping Sword with the other. At that moment, the Immortal Trapping Sword only had a tiny bit of chaos power left before it could be completely repaired. And this tiny bit of chaos power was hidden in Gohan's hand. The reason why Gohan didn't inject the last bit of chaos power was because he was afraid that he would enter a petrified state when he held the Immortal Trapping Sword. Now that everything was ready, Gohan let go of all his reservations and injected the last bit of chaos power into the Immortal Trapping Sword. In the dimensional rift, 2 stone statues, one male and one female, stood on a hill. Suddenly, a golden pillar of light shot out from one of the female stone statues. This golden pillar of light penetrated the dimensional rift and shot into the boundless sky, dyeing the originally blue sky a golden color. At the same time, countless phantoms of phoenixes and dragons began to revolve around the golden light pillar. Countless strange phenomena appeared at that moment. These were the strange phenomena of an emperor ascension. This meant that another emperor sword wielder had been born. Master, your disciple has succeeded. Your disciple has passed the chaser of the 9 states. Lu Shihua turned back into his human form. At the same time, he happily said to Gohan beside him. However, at this time, Lu Shihua also discovered that his master had actually turned into a stone statue. Master actually didn't wait for me. Does he not have confidence in his disciple? Lu Shihua pouted and thought to himself. Just as he was about to wait for his master to complete the chaser of the 9 states, Song Yifei's voice suddenly sounded in Lu Shihua's ear. Lu Shihua, have you succeeded in becoming an emperor? Song Yifei asked with jealousy and congratulation. Yes. Lu Shihua grunted. That's enough. Zheng has already started to go crazy. Quickly come out and stop him. Otherwise, everything will be too late. Song Yifei hurriedly urged. Got it. Lu Shihua responded and glanced worriedly at Gohan, who was still in a petrified state. Master is so strong. It should be impossible for him to not be able to handle the chaser of the 9 states. I'd better deal with Zheng first. With that thought in mind, Lu Shihua left the dimensional rift and charged toward Yuzhong City. At this time, Gohan was not as relaxed as Lu Shihua imagined. In fact, Gohan was in a somewhat difficult state because Gohan was now dealing with the entire demon race's heavenly court. After entering a state of synchronization with the Xianyuan sword and the celestial trapping sword, when Gohan opened his eyes again, he found himself in a wild world. The shortest tree in this world was as high as a 10-story building, and the tallest tree was so high up in the clouds that it was impossible to see the top of the tree with the naked eye. At the same time, there was a phoenix, which was known as the divine bird in later generations, which was rarely seen in 1,000 years. At this time, it was like an ordinary crow or sparrow, flying freely in the sky. On the ground, there were groups of Chilants and demon beasts everywhere. Gohan could also see countless naked fellows with all kinds of strange totems drawn on their bodies. At the same time, they had all kinds of strange animal characteristics. They walked upright on the ground. Some of them were picking fruits, some were killing demon beasts, and some were fighting to the death with soldiers wearing silver armor but with all kinds of beast heads. As soon as Gohan regained consciousness, he began to try to contact his 10 sword maidens. In the end, he lost contact with all 10 sword maidens. There was no way to communicate with them at all. When Gohan touched his waist, he found that the original 10 scabbards, along with his dimensional pocket, had disappeared without a trace. Could this be the untainted world? An untainted world formed by an illusion? After seeing what was happening in front of him clearly, Gohan could not help but think to himself. In the past, Gohan did not know what the legendary untainted world looked like. However, after obtaining the sage's relic, Gohan had a rather detailed understanding of the untainted world. After all, the sage's relic contained many stories of the untainted world, and these scenes had become one of the most profound memories of Gohan. They were firmly engraved in Gohan's mind. That towering tree should be the legendary creation tree, those naked fellows should be the Wu people, and those armored soldiers should be demons. Gohan quickly distinguished the identity and standpoint of the fellows he saw. I didn't expect Master to have such a detailed understanding of the untainted world. This saves me the trouble of introducing it to you again. A faint voice suddenly rang in Gohan's ears. This voice sounded somewhat familiar, but it was also a voice that he had never heard before. Are you the lady of celestial trapping sword? Gohan immediately realized that the owner of this voice should be the celestial trapping sword. Because she was sisters with the celestial slaying sword, the 4 of their voices sounded relatively similar. This was also why Gohan felt like he had met them before. That's right. I thank you for saving me, benefactor. You used a vast amount of chaotic power to save me. Otherwise, I don't know how long I would have to sleep in this untainted world. The celestial trapping sword said to Gohan gratefully. Why do you call yourself a little girl? Your sisters have never called you that. Upon hearing the celestial trapping sword call herself a little girl, Gohan immediately became curious. Very few sword ladies would call themselves that. I'm a little girl. Why do I need a reason? The celestial trapping sword's answer was obviously an excuse. Of course, Gohan could not get to the bottom of it, so he simply acquiesced. In that case, what should I do next? How can I complete the 9 states' fight for supremacy? To be honest, Gohan did not have much confidence in the 9 states' fight for supremacy. Although every Emperor Sword level sword wielder had gone through this step, after an Emperor Sword level sword wielder ascended to the throne, this process was a taboo. There had never been any written records that described this process in detail that had been passed down. They only told their descendants to maintain their true self during this process. That was all. Hence, until now, Gohan was still confused about the 9 states' fight for supremacy. He had no idea what he should do next. The 9 states' fight for supremacy is actually a process where my heart and Master's heart merge and we experience each other's sincerity. This is also the first time I've experienced the 9 states' fight for supremacy. I'm not sure about the specifics. However, I know that you must find the location of my real body in this illusion. As long as you can find it and hold it with your own hands, Master and I will naturally know what to do next. Celestial Trapping Sword replied. Then do you know where your real body is? Gohan asked. I'm not sure. The Celestial Trapping Sword hesitated for a while before saying, however, I'm most likely still in the hands of the old master. In other words, I'm in the hands of the Grand Master of Heaven. Gohan raised his eyebrows. All along, Gohan had been very curious about sect leader Tongtian, the big boss behind the scenes. Although there were many memories about sect leader Tongtian in the Saint Relic, Gohan was still curious about him. Although there were many memories of the Grand Master of Heaven in the Saint's Relic, Gohan had never personally met this existence that had changed the entire chaotic world. Hence, when he thought about how he was about to personally meet this super big boss, Gohan felt a little excited. However, He did not know how the Grandmaster of Heaven in the 9 states' fight for supremacy was different from the real Grandmaster of Heaven in the past. What was the difference between the Grandmaster of Heaven and the Grandmaster of Heaven who had escaped from prison and was hiding somewhere in the world to spy on the entire world? At the same time, he was secretly recuperating and preparing to make a comeback. Celestial Trapping Sword, do you know where the Grandmaster of Heaven is? Gohan decided to personally meet the Grandmaster of Heaven in the illusion, so he asked the Celestial Trapping Sword. In the Aquamarine Palace. The Celestial Trapping Sword replied. Then where is the Aquamarine Palace? Of course it's on Punglai Island. Then where is Punglai Island? Which direction should I go in? I don't know. How can you not know? Aren't you someone who lived in this era? Except for the God Investiture battle, I have never left the Aquamarine Palace, nor have I ever left the Old Master's side. However, during the God Investiture battle, the World Tree was completely destroyed, so I can't tell where Punglai Island is. The Celestial Trapping Sword said. Alright, then I'll have to ask someone else. Gohan shrugged and his eyes fell on a novice wizard who was chopping wood not far away. This novice wizard was different from other novice wizards with bird or snake heads. This novice wizard almost looked like a human. If it were not for the Qiangliang tribe's totem painted on his body, Gohan would have thought that this guy was a real human. Chapter 1509. Which tribe are you from, Wu people? Why are you wearing such strange clothes, and I don't see any totems on your body? The sorcerer who was chopping down trees asked warily when he saw Gohan suddenly appear in front of him. I'm not from the Wu people, so of course I don't have any totems on my body. Gohan said with a smile. You're not from the Wu people? Then you must be one of those cultivators who call themselves immortals. That's not right, you don't have the unique stench of cultivators, but you look like the Wu people. You also have the smell of Pengu's bloodline. You look like a newborn child of the Wu people. Which tribe are you from? The sorcerer sniffed at Gohan from a meter away, then asked in a strange tone. I'm from the human tribe, Gohan said. Human tribe? Why have I never heard of this tribe? The sorcerer's expression became even more strange. It turned out that the time in this illusion was before Goddess Nviwa had created humans. Hearing the sorcerer's words, Gohan's understanding of the time in his heart became clearer. Before Goddess Nviwa created humans, there was no human tribe in this world, so it was normal that the sorcerer had never heard of the existence of the human tribe. There are thousands of races in the untainted land, and our human tribe is only a very small race among them. Moreover, since the Dragon and Phoenix War, our human tribe has been hiding in the wilderness. Not many of the Wu people know of our existence, so it's not strange that you don't know. Gohan said lightly. Is that so? The sorcerer looked at Gohan doubtfully, then said, I don't care which race you are from, but you can't go any further. In front of you is the territory of the Qiangliang tribe. Anyone who enters the Qiangliang tribe without permission will be killed directly, so you'd better leave quickly. The sage's relic said that Wu people have always been domineering. Today, it seems that it's true. The main camp of the Qiangliang tribe is over 1,000 kilometers away from here, but the other side has already turned this area into their own forbidden zone. There are more than 100 branches of the Qiangliang tribe in the Great Wasteland. If each of them has divided 1,000 kilometers into their own territory like this, then how can the other races survive? Gohan thought coldly in his heart. From the looks of it, the decline of the Wu people is not without reason. Their behavior was too domineering, so they were exterminated. Gohan's mind naturally came up with such a thought, but in the next second Gohan's forehead was immediately followed by a large amount of cold sweat. Gohan had just felt that the Wu people were overbearing. A small tribe dared to occupy a territory spanning 1,000 kilometers. But after thinking about it carefully, wouldn't the future human clan be more overbearing than the Wu people? In the future, the whole world would be the territory of the human clan, and the other races or animals would either become the pets or food of the human clan. The remaining wild animals could only rely on the animal protection of the human clan to survive. To a certain extent, the human clan was more than 10 times more overbearing than the Wu people. Forget it, this world is a world where the weak are prey to the strong. If the human clan is not strong, it is impossible for them to exist in this world. Who cares about being overbearing? In just a few seconds, so many thoughts flashed through Gohan's mind. When the other party found that Gohan did not leave after a long time, he could not help but feel a little annoyed and said, "Leave quickly, or I will take action." The Wu people are really hot-tempered. Gohan chuckled and then said, "Brother, don't worry. I have no intention of entering the territory of the Chang Liang tribe. I have received orders from the elders of the tribe to send a letter to the Bio Palace of Penglai Island. But I am a greenhorn, and the untainted land is too vast, so I have lost my way. I wonder if you can tell me where the Bio Palace of Penglai Island is? As long as I know the way, I will leave immediately and will not disturb you." "You want to go to the Bio Palace, the territory of the sect leader of Tongtian?" The other party was shocked by Gohan's words and could not help but ask. "Yes." Gohan nodded. "The human clan is actually related to the sage?" The other party asked again. His face was almost in front of Gohan, and Gohan was almost disgusted. "The elders of my tribe are friends with the sage of Tongtian. What's so strange about that? I'll have to trouble brother to quickly tell me which direction this green touring palace is," Gohan said impatiently. "My name is Wu Gang, a heaven shaman from the Chang Liang tribe. It is fate that brought us together. I see that you must be tired from the journey. Why don't you come to my house and rest for a while? You don't even need to eat for the night. I have mammoth meat that I just killed yesterday. It is really delicious. Let's share it." Wu Gang's attitude took an unexpected 180-degree turn. From his previous indifferent expression, he became like a brother to Gohan, trying his best to invite Gohan to his home. "So he is Wu Gang." Upon hearing Wu Gang's name, a hint of curiosity welled up in Gohan's heart. There were no memories of Wu Gang in the sage relic. However, to the humans of pre-Great Calamity times, Wu Gang was definitely a familiar name. Ask Wu Gang what he has, and Wu Gang brings out the osmanthus wine. This poem was believed to be familiar to most people. After all, this poem was written in the textbooks of middle school. Almost every student had to learn and recite this poem. Wu Gang was the guy who was said to cut down the osmanthus tree on the moon. Gohan always thought that this guy was an immortal. He did not expect that he was actually a Wu people. By the way, Chang-Yi is a great wizard of the Huda tribe. So it is not surprising that Wu Gang is a great wizard. Gohan thought of Chang-Yi's beautiful appearance before she turned into a blood bead. Although Gohan was a little curious about Wu Gang, he did not know the ratio of the time he spent in the dreamland and the time he spent in the real world. Therefore, Gohan did not want to waste too much time in the dreamland, so he refused. "I was already delayed because I was lost. If I delay for another day, I will miss the ancestors' important matter. It is better for me to leave first." "Hey brother, what you said is wrong. From the Land of Moon to the Aquamarine Palace, with your pace, it will take at least 3 months. Compared with 3 months, why do you care about 1 day? Besides, the road to the Aquamarine Palace is complicated. If there is no one to guide you, I am afraid that you will still get lost. If there is someone who can guide you all the way to the Aquamarine Palace, it will really save time." Wu Gang grabbed Gohan's arm and said, "That is true." Gohan nodded. At the same time, he looked at Wu Gang curiously. It seemed that Wu Gang had something to ask of him. "Hee brother, you are particularly congenial today. If you accompany me back home to eat meat, I will go with you tomorrow and personally take you to the Aquamarine Palace. I guarantee that you will not make any mistakes on the way." How about it? Wu Gang looked at Gohan with bright eyes. If Gohan did not agree, he was afraid that Wu Gang would directly kidnap Gohan and take him back home. If Wu Gang was really willing to guide Gohan, then Gohan did not mind going back home with Wu Gang. In fact, as Wu Gang said, if there was someone to lead the way, Gohan could save a lot of time. However, what was Wu Gang thinking in his heart? He was actually kind enough to lead the way for Gohan. It must be known that this was not an ordinary guide, but a guide for a full 6 months. Wu Gang was afraid that Gohan had some other thoughts. Alright, since Brother Wu Gang sincerely invited me, then I will respectfully accept your invitation. No matter what Wu Gang's intention was, Gohan was not afraid and went back home with Wu Gang. Wu Gang's home was not far from the place where the tree was cut. It was just a mountain. In Wu Gang's home, there was indeed mammoth meat that had already been prepared. The so-called mammoth meat was the meat of a mammoth. Mammoths had been extinct for tens of thousands of years. It was unexpected that one could actually taste this animal in the Great Desolation. However, after taking a bite, Gohan felt a deep hatred for the mammoth meat. The meat had a sour smell, which made people want to vomit after taking a bite. It was simply incomparable to the pork of the future. Sure enough, pigs, which have been domesticated by humans for thousands of years, are more suitable for human taste. In some novels, there are all kinds of delicious things in ancient times. It is simply an unreliable imagination. Gohan thought. Brother Gohan, why don't you eat? On the other side, Wu Gang, whose mouth was full of oil, saw that Gohan did not eat the mammoth meat in front of him. He was slightly puzzled and asked, "Oh, I don't have a good appetite today. I will eat some fruits." Gohan smiled slightly and then looked at Wu Gang with a gaze that seemed to be able to penetrate into his bone marrow. Wu Gang's hair stood on end under Gohan's gaze. Even the meat in his mouth did not taste so delicious. "Brother Gohan, why are you looking at me like that?" Wu Gang asked nervously. "Nothing. I am just curious about what Brother Wu Gang wants me to do for you." Gohan slightly curled his lips and said, "Brother Wu Gang, I heard that you Wu people are straightforward people. Our human race is also the same. Why don't we open our hearts and say what we want to say? It will be better to avoid misunderstanding in the future." This. Wu Gang hesitated for a while and finally nodded. He told the real reason why his attitude changed so quickly. It is actually related to Chang-E and Ho-E. After listening to Wu Gang's words, Gohan was somewhat surprised. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.